Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Borough President Adams' Uniform Land Use Review Procedure Public Hearing. My name is Jeff Lowell. I'm the Policy Director for the Brooklyn Borough President, and I'm joined tonight by our Land Use Director, Richard Barak, and our Land Use Coordinator, Ina Gusenfeld. As the Governor's emergency order authorizing virtual public hearings was rescinded on June 25th, the Borough President's Office has resumed in-person hearings in accordance with the Open Meetings Law. Tonight, we are conducting these proceedings simultaneously at Borough Hall and remotely via WebEx. This hearing is being recorded to comply with the public law for transparency and will be available on Borough President Adams' One Brooklyn channel on YouTube. Brooklyn Borough Hall will be open this evening to those who wish to speak or listen to the hearing. To testify in person, you must complete a speaker slip and be in the courtroom when your name is called. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that face masks must be worn at all times inside Borough Hall. Online viewers may join the hearing via the link and password on the following slide. To testify, please message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. Additional comments and longer testimony may be sent to askeric@brooklynbp.nyc.gov for Borough President Adams' consideration. Please call the item and let's begin.
Calendar item number 1, 210406ZRY.
This application, submitted by the New York City Department of City Planning for a citywide action affecting all boroughs and community districts to require a special permit for new hotels. The proposed City Planning Commission special permit would establish a case-by-case, site-specific review process to better regulate where and how hotels are built and ensure that new hotels do not create conflicts with surrounding uses. It would also replace existing CPC special permits for new hotels and enlargements in specific C1 districts, C2-4, C4, C5, C6, C8, MX, and paired M1/R districts, where hotels are currently permitted as of right. We remind web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. We will call speakers after the presentation and question and answer session. Would Alexander Plakis, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Hello, my name is Alex Plakis. I will be presenting virtually. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Plakis. I work with the Department of City Planning in the Housing and Economic Development Division, and I will be presenting to you the citywide hotel special permit. Next slide, please. So this project is a zoning text amendment that would create a new special permit for hotel development across the city. The goal is to create a consistent framework for hotel development and ensure that new hotels do not negatively affect the surrounding area. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to start with a description of New York City's hotel market over the past decade. By 2019, before the pandemic hit, New York City had experienced record growth in the tourism industry and its hotel pipeline for the 10th consecutive year. Visitor trends peaked in 2019 with almost 67 million visitors, up from 46 million in 2009. Visitor count was forecasted to increase even more in 2020 to almost 69 million. Furthermore, sizable growth of hotel room supply has been a prevailing factor in New York City for much of the past decade. Between 2009 and 2019, the total number of hotel rooms in the New York City market grew from just over 80,000 to over 127,000. And in the past 5 years alone, New York City saw a 40% increase in hotel inventory. Despite this increase in room supply, demand also continued to rise, keeping the annual occupancy at almost 87%. Occupancy rates in New York City are among the highest for urban markets in the United States. The growth of the New York City market over the last decade was driven by both international and domestic travelers. And these visitors are coming to New York City for its cultural offerings, with shopping and sightseeing being the principal reason for about 86% of international visitors. Next slide, please. Over the years, rapid growth of new hotels across different districts in the city has led to concerns about conflicts with surrounding uses. Notably, in 2018, a special permit was adopted for hotels in M1 districts to address conflicts between hotels and the operations of industrial businesses. Next slide, please. To address these concerns, the City Planning Commission has adopted a variety of special permits, as you can see on the map on the right side of your screen. This has resulted in an inconsistent framework for regulating hotels. Slide, please. Furthermore, in C and MX districts, hotels have introduced conflicts with surrounding uses. Overnight accommodations differ from other as-of-right uses in proximity because they are similar to both commercial and residential uses, but also have the potential to create conflicts with both. This unique distinction of hotels may require additional scrutiny to ensure they are developed in ways that won't present conflicts with the neighborhood and local businesses. A robust tourism economy is vital to the city's economic health and is expected to recover from the pandemic. Once the industry recovers from the pandemic, hotel development is expected to resume. And the patterns of hotel development over the last 15 years still indicate a need to ensure that hotel development does not create conflicts with surrounding uses. The proposed text amendment will create a consistent zoning framework for new hotels and allow the City Planning Commission to evaluate each hotel development's impact on the future use and development of the surrounding area. Next slide, please. So as mentioned before, hotels have the potential to create land use conflicts in a variety of neighborhood contexts and zoning districts. We're already aware of the potential conflicts hotels can have in light manufacturing or M1 districts. And several C districts in the city also have hotels in areas where it can be in conflict with nearby businesses, or the site may be planned in a way that may be unsafe for guests and residents alike. The hotel in the C8 district, as seen in the top left, is located across the street from a cemetery and is surrounded by heavy commercial uses, which we do not believe is ideal location for a hotel. The hotel in the C62 district is an example where the hotel is set back from the street, creating a less than ideal pedestrian environment. The hotel in the bottom right, C43A district, is located in the Rockaways and is a hotel where better site planning may have led to a wider sidewalk. The current sidewalk leading to the beach is thin and may push pedestrians into the street, causing safety concerns for guests and residents. Similarly, the hotel in the top right, C43A district, forces vehicles to drive over the sidewalk through a large curb cut, which may present conflicts with pedestrians. Next slide, please. So the new special permit will be applicable in higher density commercial districts, mixed use districts, and paired M1 residential districts, where there is currently not a special permit today. The proposed citywide special permit will also replace existing special district special permits, as seen in the gray here. And the existing M1 hotel special permit will retain its findings that are specific to light industrial areas. So to explain the map in the left side of your screen, the magenta color shows areas that would require the new citywide hotel special permit. This means that any hotel development would need to apply for this special permit with the Department of City Planning. This process would make all proposed hotels subject to ULURP review, which includes time for community boards to review, adopt, and submit a recommendation to the City Planning Commission. Next slide, please. Similar to M1, we will not require a special permit for hotels that are for a public purpose, such as temporary housing for the homeless. This means that rules for siting of homeless facilities will not change and will continue to be permitted as of right in districts where they are allowed today. While we understand the concerns communities may have, the proposal is intended to address the land use concerns related to commercial hotels and is neutral with current policies regarding homelessness. Next slide, please. So, New York City's hotels provide an important amenity for all New Yorkers, and for this reason have long been permitted with limited regulation in districts with varied land use context in much of the city. Hotels serve a diverse set of customers in all 5 boroughs, from international tourists in Midtown, airline workers in Jamaica, visitors coming to the city's medical institutions, and relatives visiting with friends or family living in any of New York City's neighborhoods. While it is important that hotels can continue to locate throughout the city to support a vibrant tourism economy and meet the diverse needs of its residents and businesses, the pace and patterns of development driven by record high visitation has created conflicts with adjacent uses and overwhelmed some communities. For example, the images shown here are of the front and back of a hotel located in the South Bronx. It's located near Yankee Stadium and is an appropriate location for a hotel. However, access to the hotel is on a busy access road on the major Deegan with an entrance that presents potential safety issues for pedestrians and guests of the hotel. The parking and back of house services at the rear of the hotel are located on a quiet residential block. Review of the way the use is configured on the site would likely have resulted in a development that's more sensitive to the surrounding context and less likely to create conflicts of safety issues for guests and adjacent uses. It's also important to note the proposed special permit does not preclude hotel development, nor does it deem all future hotels inappropriate. It requires the City Planning Commission to assess the appropriateness of such development based on the future use and development of the surrounding area. Next slide, please. So I'd like to briefly talk about the impacts of the pandemic on the hotel industry and ways that we have modified the proposal to try to address these challenges. The COVID pandemic had a significant effect on the New York City hotel market. Between January and November of 2020, a net total of 146 hotels out of 705 and over 42,000 rooms have closed. Luxury and upscale room types accounted for almost 85% of this loss. Estimates by the city's independent budget office place job losses in the hospitality and leisure industry at around 197,000 jobs in 2020. So COVID has had an impact on the hotel industry, but there is optimism that the city will recover and visitors will return, with many experts placing this recovery in 2025. With that return in demand, the Department of City Planning anticipates development to return to pre-pandemic levels, leading to a need for the special permit, allowing for better regulation. However, we do not want these regulations to prevent recovery of the city. Next slide, please. To minimize the likelihood that the special permit will impair the recovery of the hotel industry, we have created these recovery provisions. There's modified vesting provisions to facilitate projects that are already in the pipeline. Aging projects filed with the Department of Buildings prior to 2018 will need to obtain a foundation permit prior to the adoption date. Projects filed between the January 1st of 2018 and the referral date, which was May 3rd of 2021, will need to obtain a zoning plan approval from the Department of Buildings prior to adoption. Both categories of these vested projects have 6 years instead of the standard 2 from date of adoption to complete construction to ensure that projects can be constructed as demand returns. Approved City Planning Commission or Board of Standards and Appeals applications will not require a special permit if these applications were approved after January 1st of 2018. Applications that begin CPC public review or are filed with BSA prior to adoption will not require a special permit. And finally, there is an extended discontinuance provision allowing vacant hotels extra time to return to transient use. Usual discontinuance allows for a building that has been vacant for 2 years to reopen with its previous use. We are proposing an extension to 6 years to allow for these closed hotels to reopen. These provisions are meant to allow for a portion of the 42,000 closed rooms to return, bringing back an important industry to New York City. Next slide, please. A draft environmental impact statement and market study were done to understand what the projected loss in rooms would mean for the hotel and tourism industries. Findings of the study and DEIS show we expect sufficient inventory by 2030 to support the amount of pre-pandemic visitors, which is a robust tourism economy. However, because of the special permit being expected to slow the growth of new hotels, it is expected that there would not be enough rooms to meet demand with the no action in 2035, leading to a shortfall of approximately 47,000 rooms. Because of this future shortfall of rooms and potential effects on visitation, the DEIS is showing a significant adverse impact on the hotel and tourism industries. However, as we expect that as visitation recovers, the concerns that have been raised with respect to hotel development over the last 15 years will once again arise, focusing attention on the subject of this proposal, the regulation of how and where hotels are built. Next slide, please. Now, these are the findings of the special permit. And as you can see, the finding shall be, the commission shall find that such use will not impair the future use or development of the surrounding area. And next slide, please. And if there are any questions, myself and I believe Barry Dinnerstein, the Deputy Director of Housing and Economic Development, is currently in person at Borough Hall, and we both are more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. I do have a few questions. I think you addressed some of them, but we'll just put them in for the record. Borough President Adams understands that there are currently hotels in various stages of development. Please describe what is being proposed to determine vested status to allow and or preclude continuation. Please.
Just one moment.
Hi, my name is Barry Dinnerstein. I'm a city planner at the Department of City Planning. The
You
current
get a little closer to the mic.
Sure. Okay. So the current proposal has like two classifications: projects that had filed plans with the Department of Buildings prior to the referral of the zoning text would be able to continue. Projects must then have a zoning approval by the time the proposed zoning is adopted, at which point they will be able to continue. Normally, a project must have a foundation permit at the time of, a foundation actually in the ground at the time of the adoption of the zoning to continue. But in this case, because of COVID, because of difficulties that people had in doing construction, we're allowing people to continue to develop their hotel project so long as they have zoning approval prior to adoption of the zoning text by the City Council. And then they will have up to 6 years to complete the project as opposed to 2 years, which is customary for other types of projects when zoning changes.
Okay. And based on the recent requirement for special permits in manufacturing districts, what has been learned with regard to subsequent special permit filings?
Well, I think we are expecting to get relatively few applications for a special permit. We have not seen in the manufacturing districts, we have not seen any applications. While we do expect, as a result of this action, that we will see some applications, in this particular case, we do not expect to see many applications.
Okay. And the manufacturing district's special permit included specific carve-out areas. What consideration was given to such areas in this expanded version of the special permit requirement?
Well, the M1 proposal only excludes the airports, and the airports are not covered by zoning because they're under Port Authority jurisdiction. And so for this proposal, there are no exclusions. This is a citywide permit, and any hotel being built except perhaps at the airports would be subject to special permit.
Richard, anything? Good. Okay. So just a quick remind viewers, web viewers, that you wish to testify, you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes. We'll now call speakers on this item. Okay. Richard, do you want to close it?
Calendar item number 1 is closed. Calendar item number 2, 200319 PCK 200321 PSK 200320 MMK 180039 MMK.
These applications, submitted by the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, the New York City Department of Sanitation, and the New York City Department of Administrative Services for the following actions. 1. Site selection of a property located at 2 2nd Avenue in Brooklyn, Community District 6, for use as a CSO control facility. 2. Site selection and acquisition of a property location at 110 5th Street, 122 5th Street, 22 2nd Avenue, 5th Street, and 2nd Avenue for DSNY salt and equipment storage, environmental education activities, and additional space as needed for the CSO control facility. 3. An amendment to the city map involving the elimination of 1. Douglas Street between Nevin Street and the Gowanus Canal, and the adjustment of grades and block dimensions as necessary, in accordance with map number N-2752, dated July 2nd, 2019, and approved by the Brooklyn Borough President. 2. 5th Street between 2nd Avenue and the Gowanus Canal, and the adjustment of grades and block dimensions as necessary, in accordance with map number X-2758, dated May 3rd, 2021, and signed by the Borough President. Community Board 6 approved this application on July 6th, 2021. We remind web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. We will call speakers after the presentation and question and answer session. Would Alicia West, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Hi everyone, my name is Alicia West and I work for the Department of Environmental Protection and Public Affairs. I'm here today with my great team, Kevin Clark from our Bureau of Engineering, Design, and Construction, who will do the majority of our presentation today, and also Rashid Lucas, who's here from our Bureau of Environmental Planning and Analysis. So we're here today to present the ULURP application, which we'll go through, for our Owl's Head facility as a part of the Gowanus CSO program. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin now.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kevin Clark. I am a portfolio manager with the New York City DEP's Bureau of Engineering, Design, and Construction, and responsible for implementing the Gowanus CSO tank program for the DEP. Next slide, please. So after the Gowanus Canal was constructed in the 1860s, it very quickly became one of the nation's busiest industrial waterways, serving very heavy industries along the canal, including chemical plants, oil refineries, and 3 manufactured gas plants. In 2010, the EPA, US EPA, designated the Gowanus Canal a Superfund site, identifying a number of potential responsible parties, including New York City and National Grid. And in 2013, EPA issued its record of decision, which required the city to participate in the remediation of petroleum-based contaminants from the canal sediment, and also reduce combined sewer overflows from discharging into the canal. Next slide, please. So New York City's sewer system is approximately 60% combined, which means it is used to convey both sanitary and storm flows within the same pipe. In and around the Gowanus drainage area, it is basically all combined sewer. When the sewer system is at full capacity, a diluted mixture of rainwater and sewage can be released into local waterways, and that is what's called a combined sewer overflow. CSO retention facilities can be designed and constructed to collect and store those combined sewer overflows during wet weather events, and then pump that flow back to the wastewater treatment plant when the storm subsides for treatment. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the city has already made a considerable investment in reducing CSOs into Gowanus Canal using a variety of approaches. The first was the reconstruction of the Gowanus wastewater pumping station and the ongoing installation of high-level storm sewers to convey some storm water separately from sanitary sewage, and also green infrastructure to keep stormwater out of the sewer system altogether. Next slide, please. The two Gowanus CSO facilities will continue the work to limit CSO discharges into the canal with the construction of 2 underground storage tanks and associated head houses to intercept and store those CSOs during wet weather events. So the head end facility is located at the top of the canal, and that will be an 8 million gallon tank. That project went through ULURP back in 2017, and we anticipate start of construction this fall. The second facility, the second CSO facility, is the one that we're here to discuss today, and is located at the midpoint in the canal, right at the bend. We call that the Owl's Head tank, or Owl's Head site, and that will have a 4 million gallon CSO tank. Both tanks will have associated above-ground structures to house pumps, screens, electrical equipment, and also odor control. Next slide, please. To build the CSO facility at Owl's Head, the city is moving forward with 4 ULURP actions that we're here to discuss today. And these actions include the site selection and acquisition of 4 privately owned lots, site selection of a city-owned lot, and 2 city map amendments to demap 5th Street between 2nd Avenue and the canal, and to demap Douglas Street between Nevin Street and the canal associated with the head end facility site. This ULURP was certified by City Planning on May 3rd and is anticipated to be complete by the end of the year. As mentioned earlier, we did receive the Community Board approval, and today, Borough Presidents review, then City Planning Commission review, and then City Council. Next slide, please. So the Owl's Head facility site is located within the Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone, and this map shows that the majority of the properties in the area are zoned industrial and manufacturing. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial of the current condition of the site. Next slide, please. And here's that same aerial overlaid with the block and lot information of the parcels we plan to site select and acquire. So block 977, lot 3, at the top, it's already owned by the city and is home to the Department of Sanitation's salt shed and plow storage, as well as a composting and nursery facility that's operated by Big Reuse in partnership with the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. We plan to relocate all of these services during construction and reestablish permanent facilities for them following construction of the CSO facility. Next slide, please. Just going to go through some pictures of the site as it exists today. So this site is a view of the DSNY salt lot looking west from 2nd Avenue. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of 5th Street looking west from 2nd Avenue. Next slide, please. Here's a view of 5th Street looking east towards 2nd Avenue. Next slide, please. And here's a picture of the site looking southwest along 2nd Avenue. Next slide, please. So here's an illustrative slide of the conceptual layout for the use of the site. So the salmon-colored triangle up top is the area that will be used for the DEP CSO tank and the associated head house. And the yellow areas will be used for construction staging during construction of the tank, relocation of the Department of Sanitation's operations and big reuse facilities, both during and after construction of the CSO tank, and public open space along the waterfront. Next slide, please. The first city map amendment would demap 5th Street between 2nd Avenue and the canal. I didn't mention it earlier, but 5th Street is actually privately owned. Next slide, please. The second city map amendment is at the head end facility site, and that would demap Douglas Street, which is a paper street between Nevin Street and the canal. And the CSO tank is going to occupy the 2 parcels of north and south of that paper street. Next slide, please. For the next 2 slides, my colleague Rashid Lucas is going to present.
Thank you, Kevin. So DEP conducted an environmental review and produced an environmental impact statement, or EIS, in 2017 and 2018 for both the head end and outside facilities. We found there could be potential impacts to historic resources at both facilities. Before certification of the present ULURP applications, we issued a technical memorandum in April of 2021 to review and refresh the environmental impact areas. It was concluded that the significant adverse environmental impacts findings remain unchanged from those previously identified in the FEIS. Next slide, please. In regards to historic resources, in coordination with SHPO and LPC during and after the environmental review process, we completed a geoarchaeological assessment for both facilities. We found there was a low potential for the project to impact deeply buried archaeological resources. SHPO reviewed and concurred with the assessment and DEP recommendations in November of 2019. Despite the low potential of impact, DEP will conduct archaeological monitoring during construction activities. We also will continue to coordinate with EPA, SHPO, and LPC. More information is included in Chapter 7 of the FEIS and page 7 of the April 2021 technical memorandum. Now I'll give it back to Kevin to talk schedule.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So just a very brief slide on the schedule. We have issued the FEIS. That was back in 2017. We certified ULURP back in May of this year. The anticipated completion date for this ULURP is December of 2021. And we have just kicked off the facility planning and design for the outside tank, and we do expect to complete design in fall of 2023. Construction is broken up into 3 separate phases. The first phase is preparation of the existing site and demolition of the existing structures and relocation of sanitation and the big reuse facilities. And that is expected to be roughly a 12 to 15 month duration. The second phase, which we call CP2, is installation of the supportive excavation and excavation of all of the below ground components of the tank, and installation of all substructures and foundations. That is expected to be a 36-month duration. And then CP3, which is the last phase, is the construction of all of the above ground structures and mechanical and electrical fit out of the CSO facility, as well as startup and commissioning of the facility. And that is expected to be roughly a 27-month duration. Current anticipated completion date is approximately 2028, but that is subject to change based on coordination with EPA. Next slide, please. Turn this over to Alicia.
wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about our public engagement. It's something that we've heard from the community board and a lot of stakeholders in the community. This is just a list of some of the public engagement we did for the head-end site, which is the northern tank. So you can see from 2017 through 2020, we were meeting with Community Board 6. Councilmember Levin held a community input meeting. Gowanus Canal Conservancy held a wonderful presentation and workshop. And all of that really helped us get a sense of, from the community, of what their thoughts are about the project and what they'd like to see. And so as we move forward with our Owl's Head tank, the southern tank, we're going to be engaging with the community over that time through the design process to get a sense of, to give everyone an understanding of, you know, what is going to be here, but also to get an understanding of what the community would like to see. So I think that's our last slide, so we have time for questions.
Thank you. There are approximately 6 active businesses that would have to be permanently vacated in order to prepare for the site for construction. Should DEP acquire these properties before its target deadline, would the owners be required to deliver the buildings unoccupied, or would there be an option for tenants to remain with the city taking over as interim landlord if they have not already secured an alternative space? Furthermore, given the potential for direct displacement as a result of DEP's acquisition, and in the interest of preserving local jobs, what consideration would be given to helping these businesses secure new space, both while the property is in private hands and if the city takes ownership with any tenants remaining?
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm going to
a
let
long one.
Kevin answer that one.
Sure. So I'll take the first part first. So yes, the tenants can, the properties do not have to be delivered vacant. In fact, as part of acquisition of the properties for the head NCSO facilities, none of those properties were delivered vacant. And both property owners as well as their tenants continue to operate on the site for some time after the city acquired it. Some tenants are still there right now. So the city can act as a landlord in that, if that is the case. And to answer the second question regarding assistance to the businesses, the city does offer fair compensation for moving expenses, fixtures, and also does provide some relocation assistance in the form of support for finding new spaces that might meet their needs and helping show them those properties.
Thank you. As the stormwater holding tank requires substantial excavation to prepare the site, the removal of excavated material would necessitate an expensive carting operations. The operation of the facility would also require removal of debris moving through local sewers. Reliance on such carting operation would exacerbate current noise conditions and add more vehicles to congested streets, leading away from the Gowanus industrial area. As the site abuts a navigable waterway, what consideration has been given to moving excavated material and debris by barge rather than solely by truck in order to minimize noise and congestion in the Gowanus Canal area?
Yes, so for both construction of the head-end facility and for this facility, we will continue to explore barging of the excavated material. That is something that will require extensive coordination with the activities that are occurring within the canal, both from a scheduling standpoint. You know, we can't delay the in-canal progress and vice versa. Also, from the standpoint of there's limited space in the canal. If you do look at the current dredging and capping operation, they do have to use much smaller barges because the canal isn't that wide, and you have small passes through the bridge openings. So that is something that we have looked at. We will continue to look at. We have not eliminated it, and we would hope, you know, if that can work out, we would gladly go with that approach.
Thank you. Community Board 6 seeks a commitment to the provision of waterfront access and the design of the salt lot and inclusion of a pedestrian bridge crossing the Gowanus Canal to connect with the intended park adjacent to the proposed Gowanus Green development. What is the city's intent with regard to these objectives?
So we're just beginning our design process, and we are aware of some of the community desires for waterfront access. as well as the lowlands plan, which Gowanus Canal Conservancy developed, which includes a pedestrian bridge. So, as I said, we are just in the beginning of design and also in the beginning of our outreach processes. We want to hear, from everybody. As we're sort of developing our scope, we know that we, so far are planning on including, waterfront esplanade in accordance with waterfront access, and, things are open and we're looking into them and to have a better understanding of what everybody in the community, would like to see here. We'll continue to do outreach. I will say that the construction of a pedestrian bridge is not a part of our Superfund scope, so that's important to understand.
Thank you. And how will the Gowanus Canal Conservancy be accommodated during construction?
So Kevin spoke a little bit about the game of, I like to think of it as game of musical chairs as we're sort of constructing these different spaces. But we are we've been in communication with Gowanus Canal Conservancy. They have been a wonderful partner in all the activities going on along the Gowanus Canal. So we are in contact with them and in discussion with them, as well as obviously sanitation, who oversees the big reuse contract for the composting, which I understand that GCC is partnering on. So Kevin can talk a little bit more specifically about how things will sort of be constructed and reconstructed. So I'll turn it over to him, but we have been in contact with GCC and will continue to do so.
Thanks.
Just briefly, so the city, under the ULURP, is intending to acquire 4 private parcels. One of those parcels we have slated for DSNY to relocate the salt storage shed, the composting facilities, and potentially the nursery. And so that could be accommodated during construction of the CSO tank. The remainder of the site that we are acquiring would be used as construction staging to support the construction of the CSO tank. And then following construction of the CSO tank, we plan to construct permanent facilities for DSNY and their partners.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder to web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes, and we'll call speakers.
Yeah, I just want to add, we've had speakers that came in a little late on the first item, so after we conclude speakers on the second item, we will go reopening the first item and take those speakers.
Any speakers on the second item? No? Okay. Richard, do you want to close it?
Calendar item number 2 is closed, and we will now briefly reopen calendar item 1 to take testimony.
Okay, we have several speakers on the first item, tuning in via WebEx. Our first speaker is Olivia Lehrer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Lehrer, and I'm a mom who's lived in Brooklyn for 12 years in Flatbush. I'm deeply concerned about the lack of access to affordable housing in my community, and I'm concerned that if there were going to be more hotels built around me, that it would further impact our ability to find affordable housing. I currently live in a 1-bedroom apartment with my husband and my 3-year-old son. We've been looking for a 2-bedroom apartment, but we're not finding anything within our price range. So I just wanted to express my support for a special permit for hotels. I think communities should have a voice on what's being built in our neighborhoods, and I think that we really need to focus on building more affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Jamel Henderson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Okay. Good evening to everyone, to the Brooklyn Borough President, and to the members of the General Brooklyn Board. Sorry. My name is Jamel Henderson, and I'm here on behalf of the people of Brooklyn, as a resident of Brooklyn, to share with you the importance for this board to support the hotel permits, where we the people must have a strong and powerful voice and presence in the decision-making process. Consider this. As of right now, families who are experiencing homelessness are dealing with a vast amount of instability. Developers are building hotels across our borough out of nowhere, and we, the people of Brooklyn, have little to no say in the matter. If you were to talk to the common person on the street, they would not know what's going on. We need to be focusing on the bigger picture, which is a true path for these families experiencing homelessness to be on the path to permanent, affordable housing. You see, the people of Brooklyn are all about spreading and exuding love. Our voices must be present at the table because the love that we have for the people who are unfortunately experiencing homelessness is not present in this space and time, and unfortunately it goes against our combined efforts to make lives stable and secure when we don't see true affordable housing for these families. You see, it may be easy to not be empathetic towards their experiences, but make no mistake that it could be any one of us at this time. And I stand for them and for all who are looking for true affordable permanent housing. So I'm asking this board to please stand with the people, consider their experiences, respect their experiences, do the right thing to make their lives better. I want us all to sleep peacefully at night knowing that the vote that you all make will support not only the hotel permits with the people's voice is not coming from a political decision, but the decision that is from your heart. Please support the hotel permits where we the people have seats at the table, and let's make the lives of our fellow Brooklynites experiencing homelessness much easier on the path to permanent housing. Thank you so much, and I hereby submit my report.
Our next speaker is Carlos Encarnacion.
Good evening, elected officials and panelists of the board. I'm a resident of Bushwick in Brooklyn, and throughout the years, I have seen many changes happening in my neighborhood. Some of them positive, some of them not that positive. And we have seen the proliferation of hotels at the same time that we have seen the diminishings and the amount of affordable housing in our communities. And we have seen the displacement of a lot of our friends and families, people that we used to count because they were next to us. We can't count on them anymore. And even though I acknowledge the tourism, it's a need for the city because the revenues they create for the city, but the city depends on the people that living in it. Like tourists will not come to put out the fires. Tourists will not come to clean our streets. Tourists will not come and do the lawns, So we need people in the city. And at the end of the day, the tax base is the people that live in the city. So because we need people in the city, because we need affordable housing, and because we need, a vibrant city, I urge this board to vote yes in the special permit for hotels. Because, even though we need tourists, and we need tourism, we need more residents, to be a vibrant city and to be, the city that live the world. So I urge this board to vote yes on the special permit for hotel. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nyomza Dubovci, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
Hello?
evening. Good evening. We can hear you.
Perfect. My name is Nyomza. I live in Kensington. The reason I moved to this neighborhood, it was because it was quiet and mostly residential. Over the past few years, we have seen more and more commercial development. I've seen new hotels get built in the neighborhoods like my own. We can see the character of these neighborhoods are changing. Hotels bring in a lot of outside visitors to the area, but will bring more traffic and more noise on nights and weekends. At the same time, those neighborhoods are getting more expensive to live. I worry that if this trend continues in my neighborhood, we'll lose its appeal as a nice place to live. Affordable housing is a major concern for me and so many of my neighbors. And yet we continue to see empty lots and old buildings being converted into more hotels. This is why I support the hotels tax amendment. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Rob Solano.
Good evening. My name is Rob Solano, the Executive Director and co-founder of Churches United for Fair Housing. Since 2007, the number of hotels in New York City has increased dramatically. Oftentimes, hotels were encroaching on manufacturing areas, replacing well-paying jobs with low-wage ones. December of 2018, NYC Planning began to require a permit for new hotels in manufacturing areas. At the time, 13% of existing hotels and 30% of proposed hotels were in the areas. This permit helped add transparency and public input into the process. Similar to what happened in manufacturing districts before the special permit, mixed use and commercial districts are facing the same challenges. We are supportive of New York City planning efforts to expand the special permit to these districts as well. By providing a means for more public feedback, we hope that local community boards and the residents can push for better developments, better paying jobs that they deserve. While this policy is no silver bullet, it is a positive step forward for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is our full list of speakers on this item. Should we get any additional requests, we will reopen this item later in the hearing.
Okay, so we're gonna close again calendar item number 2, and, I'm sorry, number 1. And we're gonna move on to calendar item number 3, 210462, ZMK 210463, ZRK.
These applications, submitted by Building 77 QALICB Inc., together with the New York City Department for Small Business Services, for the following actions. 1, a zoning text amendment to create the special Brooklyn Navy Yard District with special use, bulk, parking and loading, and publicly accessible space regulations. 2, a zoning map amendment to map the special district over the entirety of tax lots 1 and 150, and rezone parts or all of the existing R6B, M1-2, and M3-1 districts within the project area to M2-1. The requested actions would guide the future development of a modern manufacturing campus at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is expected to grow by approximately 4.6 million square feet in the next 10 to 15 years. Specifically, the proposed regulations would rationalize parking and loading controls, permit compatible community facility and commercial use to complement core industrial uses, and establish public access area requirements in connection with development in certain areas of the yard. Finally, the rules would produce modified bulk, height, and setback controls compatible with modern industrial development and the yard's surrounding context in Brooklyn Community District 2. Community Board 2 approved this application on June 16th, 2021. We remind web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. We will call speakers after the presentation and question and answer sessions. Would David Ehrenberg, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Yes, good evening. I'm David Ehrenberg. I'm president and CEO of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation, and thank you for the opportunity to present this ULURP application, which is a culmination of a master planning process that the Navy Yard has been engaged in for a number of years. I believe we have a presentation. Okay. So we're going to start. I'm going to try to move through this presentation pretty quickly. But we're going to start with an explanation of our mission, because in many ways we see the master plan and this ULURP application as the physical embodiment of that mission. So if you can go to the next slide. We believe that the Navy Yard over the last 20 years or so has emerged as not only a unique ecosystem of modern manufacturers, but really a national model for place-based economic development focused on creating high-quality middle-class jobs that are then made accessible to all local residents. Next slide. Quickly, just demographically about us, we're large. We're 300 acres, which for Brooklynites is about half of the size of Prospect Park. We have nearly 80 buildings and nearly 6.5 million square feet of real estate under roof. And we're currently home to about 450 companies that house or that have created nearly 12,000 jobs between them. Next slide. We think about our mission and our model as kind of a three-legged stool. We start with a focus on middle-class manufacturing jobs. We then use the tools available to us as a mission-driven, not-for-profit landlord to help those companies that are creating those middle-class jobs not only survive in New York City, but thrive. And then lastly, we have very robust workforce development programs to help link local residents to the economic activity happening at the Yard. And I'll go quickly through each of these three components. The focus on middle-class manufacturing jobs is something we live every day. And we think the numbers explain why they are in a critical part of the New York City economy. The average wages in the industrial and manufacturing sector are between $50,000 and $75,000 a year, depending on the exact definition. That is a living wage in New York City. And if you compare those to other truly accessible sectors in our city economy, the wage difference is very transparent, nearly double wages. And yet the manufacturing sector is deeply accessible, with about half of the workforce having nothing more than a high school diploma. And if you add a 2-year college degree or post-secondary credential, that goes up to about 80% of the workforce has something less than a 4-year college degree. And lastly, the manufacturing sector represents the true diversity of Brooklyn and New York City. It is the sector that most closely represents the demographic breakdown of the whole city, of any sector that we've looked at in the city's economy. We also think that the importance of manufacturing, just as a quick note, was laid bare during the COVID pandemic, when the Navy Yard became the epicenter of the local production of personal protective equipment. Our tenants ultimately produced over 10 million units of PPE, from masks to gowns to ventilators, that were delivered to first responders and hospitals around the city. Next slide. Like I said, we then use the tools available to us as a nonprofit landlord to really focus on manufacturing companies who often, frankly, have a hard time finding long-term, stable real estate options in New York and in Brooklyn in particular. A lot of that has to do with affordable rents, although just as importantly, there's long-term stability. Most of our tenants are, very long-term tenants of the Yard, many years, many decades in many cases, and that stability is very important for them to continue to invest in their equipment, intellectual property, and the like. We also offer a free set of business support services to our tenants. We had a very robust response to the COVID crisis for our tenants as well. We have lost only 9 tenants to date over the last year and a half or so out of 450, which we think is a real testament to the power of this model of a nonprofit landlord solving for the success of our tenants rather than simply the bottom line. And that's all created this interesting, hard to define community and ecosystem of manufacturers, designers, artists, makers, and the like. Next slide. The last part of our model is our workforce development programming, which we are very focused on and very proud of. That has 2 components. The first is hiring services, where before COVID, we placed about 600 people into jobs the year before COVID, with a focus on local residents. That includes both the immediately surrounding zip codes, that's the hyper-local, that's the 10 zip codes around the Navy Yard, and as well as our NYCHA residents who live right across the street from the Yard. We also, though, have a focus on helping those who have barriers to employment, get a start in the labor market or re-enter the labor market. 20% of those placements are long-term unemployed. This is again before COVID. The numbers, not surprisingly, during COVID have changed significantly. 20% were long-term unemployed, and 20% were formerly incarcerated individuals. The other part, and you can go to the next slide, the other part of our workforce development is really about the talent pipeline and connecting local residents, not just to the jobs of today at the yard, but also the skills required for those jobs of today and tomorrow. The crown jewel of this is the Brooklyn STEAM Center, which is a next generation career and technical education high school that we helped develop with the Board of Education. It's a new model of CTE that really connects these students immediately to job opportunities and real work life experiences. It's co-located in our largest building, in Building 77, and really immerses these students in a real world experience. Similarly, the Fierstein School is Brooklyn College, part of the CUNY System's graduate film program. It's located on Steiner Studios. It is the only graduate film program located on an active film backlot in the country, providing those CUNY students better access to their field of study than anyone else. We also have a series of CUNY partnerships, including internship programs and others, and more coming. And it's really that combination of bringing not just job seekers, but job seekers of tomorrow in close proximity with our tenants that is at the core of our model of workforce development. Next slide. And so when you bring all of that together, we hold ourselves accountable to, this is not a marketing term we use, we hold ourselves accountable to creating a truly equitable central business district. And it's the combination of those three things anchored in our local and community relationships that we have fostered over the last 60 years since the Navy decommissioned the Navy Yard that really create our model. Next slide. And the proof is, we think in the pudding, about 7 years ago or so, we had about 6,000, 7,000 people working at the yard. 9 months before COVID, we hit 10,000, replacing all of the jobs that were lost when the Navy moved out. About 6 months before COVID, 4 months or so before COVID, we had 11,000, and just before COVID, we were about to hit 12,000. COVID has certainly delayed that job growth. We think we are well on our way to 20,000 jobs based on current developments at the yard. We're now projecting to hit that in about 2025. Next slide. However, we are here today and we're pursuing this ULURP because we find ourselves at a crossroads where, I'm sorry, there's a fire truck going by outside, where we're at a crossroads where without a special district, we are concerned that this progress may stall. Next slide. The reason for that is that the growth that we've experienced to date has really been based on adaptively reusing old buildings that the Navy left to us. All of those buildings, or nearly all of those, are now fully redeveloped and tenanted. Certainly have additional investments we're going to be making in our existing buildings, but there are no vacant buildings where we can add 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 jobs at a time. And yet we continue to see strong ongoing demand for our space, for affordable, stable space for manufacturers. And that creates an imbalance where if we can't add new space, we're going to lose out on job growth, not just for the yard, but our local community in Brooklyn as a whole. Next slide. And so 4 or 5 years ago or so, we started a master plan process to ask ourselves, what does the next phase of growth at the Navy Yard look like that is fueled by not the adaptive reuse of our previous period, but ground up industrial buildings tailor-made for the needs of modern manufacturers. We also took the opportunity, as you'll see in the master plan, to integrate the Navy Yard back into the community in ways that frankly have not been true for the 220-year history of the Navy Yard, much of which was during federal control, and then to allow for a mix of uses which are not normally allowed in manufacturing districts, but as I've described, have become very central to our mission. And I'll talk about each 3 of these buckets in order. Quickly, before the ULURP process for a number of years, we engaged in public conversations, both with local stakeholders, community board, our tenant base, local not-for-profit organizations, and that's just on top of the routine and constant contact we have with these stakeholders as a normal course of our business. Next slide. The special district will, I think you all understand this, but the special district will effectively create tailored zoning controls appropriate to the Navy Yard. We think that's appropriate both because of the scale of the Navy Yard, but also the unique nature of the yard as being an industrial asset under the control of a single not-for-profit landlord. Next slide. The special district, the ULURP and the master plan is really focused on these three sub-districts where we think the majority or nearly all of the future development will be housed. Most of this area is currently underutilized or vacant, except for part of the Flushing sub-district. It's really the easternmost part of that Flushing sub-district, which is the underutilized and future development site, but we've included the rest of the sub-district to integrate it more into the community. Next slide. As a thumbnail to explain what the ULURP seeks to do, it seeks to optimize these buildings for modern manufacturers, to preserve the working waterfront while allowing integration with the local community and access to the waterfront and other areas of the yard, and to allow us to continue the mission of connecting local residents to jobs and skills. What it does not seek to do is add any density, any height, or allow any uses that are inconsistent with the current understanding of our mission. Next slide. So in terms of optimizing for modern manufacturers, that really comes down to rationalizing the amount of parking and loading docks that would be required. The 1961 zoning simply requires far more parking and loading than modern manufacturers require. We are seeking some changes to the signage regulations, given the scale of the Navy Yard and the need for a sense of arrival when you arrive at the Navy Yard, which has been cut off from the city for so long. And then these XL floors define some of the building forms, and I'll explain the XL floors on the next slide. Quickly, these buildings, this is the Navy Yard side of one of the master plan buildings. It starts at the top with an office tower. The office tower is important for us because it cross-subsidizes the manufacturers below. The manufacturers pay significantly less rent than office users, and the office users help us to afford the construction costs of that manufacturing space. We also have many tenants who start as start as office users designing products and then end up being very large-scale manufacturers for us. The middle of these buildings are our bread and butter small manufacturing floors, and then the bottom two floors that you can see here occupied are these XL floors. These are kinds of floors and kinds of buildings that have never been built in urban America. These would be 40-foot ceiling height, limited column to no column floors, where those manufacturers who may start as a design firm move down into the middle of the building into the small spaces to prototype and start manufacturing. Then when they get to scale and need a 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 square foot manufacturing floor plate, these lower floors would be available to them. These lower floors in the zoning somewhat define some of the building forms that are described in the zoning. And then lastly, on the lower two floors here, the bottom floor, you see parking, which we are seeking to replace the parking requirement with a transportation management plan, which Melanie will describe in a second. I should have said Melanie is representing us from Fried Frank and will describe some of the more technical elements of this. And then you can see on the second floor is the loading facility, which is really the lifeblood of these buildings and essential to get right for those manufacturers up above. In terms of integrating with the local community, we would seek, those sub-districts are all on the edge of the Navy Yard, which gave us an opportunity to connect with the local community more than we ever have in the past. And we would do that by creating dynamic, compelling public spaces at the yard's edge. We would then line those public spaces with public programming that would showcase the yard, explain what we do in a way that is compelling to the local community, but also true to who we are. That might be a showroom facility for goods made at the yard, a museum of science and engineering and robotics, things like that. There are then a series of shared amenities and resources that frankly we could add to the Navy Yard, but exclude local residents from. We are seeking zoning changes to allow local residents to use those amenities as well. Those would be consistent with a central business district like the Navy Yard. Primarily, those would be meeting facilities and things like that. And yet, while we do this, and while we think we have a real opportunity to integrate with the local community, we want to ensure the efficient operations of our industrial tenants. We think that is extraordinarily important to get right, because so much of the success of the yard as an industrial facility is the fact that it is offset from the rest of the community. And I'll explain how we're going to do that on the next slide. This is one of the sites, is the Barge Basin site on the Williamsburg side of the yard. Right now, all along Kent Avenue there at the edge of the yard, there's a fence which has been there for decades and decades and decades, and our security presence is effectively at that intersection. Through this master plan, we would pull the security presence back to those light blue rectangles that you see at the bottom of that rendering. And all of that green space around the Barge Basin would become publicly accessible space that the general public could just walk right into, providing uplink connections and connecting to the esplanade that is taking shape on the Brooklyn Queens waterfront. But that security presence would allow for the efficient operations, because the back of that building, which is what you just saw 3 slides ago or so, could house that efficient loading facility and industrial operations as needed. And lastly, on the ground plane of these buildings, we would house that public programming. And so on this site, we're thinking the showroom use, where you'd have manufacturers, woodworkers making furniture and then selling it right downstairs. Next slide. And this is a rendering of what that might look like. We are in continued conversations with DCP about a few fine details about the percentage of plantings, but we see this as a space that highlights the yard, that provides for public art opportunities, engineering programmings and discovery for local community of what's happening at the yard. Next slide. This is the Dumbo side, Vinegar Hill next to the Farragut houses. And lastly, the Flushing Avenue side. Lastly, the integration of uses that are consistent with our mission. So the first of those is childcare. We refer to ourselves as an equitable central business district. To truly be that, we must have childcare. We want the ability to do that and to include local residents in that childcare opportunity. So we need a zoning change for that. And educational uses, which also are not typically permitted in manufacturing zones. But as I've described, we have a CUNY facility, we have a DOE facility, and we want to see more and more of those integrations of educational opportunities with the businesses at the yard. And our goal through this is that all of this will continue our efforts to put the Navy Yard on the mental map of all Brooklynites as a place where they can come to find skills and to launch their careers. With that, I think I will hand it over to Melanie to describe some of the more technical details.
Thank you, David. It's Melanie Myers with Fried Frank, Harris Schreiber, and Jacobson. If you can go to the next slide, please. Couple more. There we go. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just spend a couple of minutes providing an overview of the zoning tools that we're proposing that will help achieve the goals for the Navy Yard that David spoke about. There are 2 actions, a zoning map amendment and a zoning text amendment. And here you can see the zoning map change. The Navy Yard would be brought within a special Brooklyn Navy Yard district, and that will allow for some tailored zoning controls. And we would also be rezoning the perimeter of the site to a uniform M21 zone that will allow for a consistent treatment of the area, as well as allow for the introduction of a few targeted uses that have a public-facing component. Next slide, please. And then the zoning text amendment itself, and it starts with the creation of a series of sub-districts. The core sub-district, which is the sort of guts of the Navy Yard and that operates today, as well as a sub-district on each of the three frontages, one on Kent, one on Flushing, and one on Navy Street. Those are that cover the sites of the master plan development and allow for some more fine-grained controls for those particular areas. Next slide. There are 5 basic topics that were covered by the zoning: use, some limited bulk controls, a requirement to introduce open space, as well as some urban design measures, and finally parking and loading. Next slide, please. And so just running through this quickly. From a use standpoint, the special district would allow for the introduction of a number of use group 3A community facility uses in the perimeter. Those are things like schools, daycares, museums, libraries, things that we could bring in, and could be interface with the community, as well as provide for the academic support for the area. Other use proposals would also be to allow for some complementary retail within the perimeter sub-districts. And this would allow for something like a showroom and a retail space for the tenants that are producing goods at the yard. We'd be making some additional smaller changes, including removing the special permit requirement for health clubs, addressing some performance standards for distilleries, and allow within the core, by authorization of the City Planning Commission, the addition of schools and colleges with programs that are complementary to the yard operations. Next slide, please. From a bulk control, for the most part, the underlying controls will remain unchanged. For example, as David said, we're not seeking any additional floor area for the site. But what we are seeking are a couple of refinements to the height and setback controls, and that will allow for the tripartite buildings that David described, with the large base and the super height floors for the flex space for the manufacturing component in the middle, as well as office space above. And so that will affect some of the controls that exist at Barge Basin, as well as with the Flushing East sub-district. We're also eliminating the yard requirement for the yard, since the yard's so big, and then it would just be a very small piece. But we are introducing the concept of a 30-foot setback along the shoreline, and that's to address some future thinking about resiliency measures over the years, to allow for buildings to think about sea level rise and to think about the future of the yard in a way that ensures that it can include resiliency components along the waterfront. Next slide, please. An important element of the special district text is the requirement for the introduction of open space as each of the master plan developments go forward. So the zoning will require that there be an open space component with each of the Navy Street subdistrict, the Flushing Avenue subdistrict, and along Barge Basin. The open spaces on Flushing and on Navy Street would be adjacent to the adjoining streets, so they would be inviting the community in and would create a sort of plaza-like amenity on those two areas. For Barge Basin, the requirements would allow for people to come into the yard, to come to the water, and to create a pedestrian esplanade around the Barge Basin. In total, there'd be about 4.3 acres of open space created as a result of the text. Next slide. And as part of that, and as David mentioned, there will be urban design controls for the portions of the buildings that face the streets and that face the open spaces that will include a combination of transparency requirements, use in floor area wrapping requirements, articulation requirements, in order to create sort of a lively and engaging street frontage in these important areas. Excuse me. And then next slide. And then finally, the last portion of the proposal relates to parking and loading, and what the proposed zoning text will do will allow for parking requirements to be replaced by a transportation management plan that would be focusing on optimizing alternatives to cars to get to the yard. It would be an ongoing plan that would be updated every 3 years with a public component so that people could go in and actually identify and see, what the statistics are for how people come to the yard, how things have changed over time. We think it's will be a great way of trying to ensure that we have the most optimal mix of parking and transportation measures. We are also looking at controlling loading through limiting the number of curb cuts on the site so that we'll avoid conflicts between the loading coming in and out of the yard and the people using the surrounding streets. And we will also maintain the standard requirement for bicycle parking, but in order to facilitate the use, allow for 50% of the required parking to be bicycle parking to be located in the open. So that's the scope of the proposal, summarizing the text, and I think wrapping up the presentation. We did get a very nice recommendation from the community board, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. First question, how would the represented plan intent be memorialized?
So the master plan, I'm sorry, the yard has a long track record of fulfilling its mission, and this is going to be no different. We published our master plan a number of years ago. Parts of it are publicly accessible, and that master plan, as I've described, is really focused on the support of our mission and executing our vision to continue to grow. This rezoning is a critical step in that, and really seeks to embody that master plan. And so between the master plan and the zoning text, I think that's where it's all memorialized.
So what factors will determine which location might include childcare facilities?
Yeah, so I would say that adding a childcare facility is a very high priority for us. We hear it from our tenants all the time and the local community. And so it's our expectation that we will likely pursue a childcare facility in one of the earlier, if not the first building that's developed. However, we do want to make sure that the surrounding residential communities have access to that facility, and we'll have to analyze which of the master plan sites allows us to best achieve that goal. And it's worth noting that the special district text, like I said before, only allows these childcare facilities in the sub-districts at the edge of the yard to make sure that local community has access to those. Another factor in the appropriate location will be the environmental perspective. We've made a commitment to DEP to analyze the building's HVAC system before siting any such facility to avoid any operational concerns. And finally, it is worth noting that we're going to have to find an operator to operate this child care facility. It's not a business line the Navy Yard intends to get into. And so at the appropriate time, we're going to have to go through that process.
Thank you. What consideration is being given to phasing the order of the intended development clusters?
So the development will be phased. It's a lot of development over a number of different sites. Our anticipated phasing is that we will begin pre-construction work on the first building, likely to be on the Barge Basin site shortly after the completion of ULURP. And while the precise schedule is not set in stone, we would expect that the rest of the Barge Basin site will then continue to be developed over time, and the Flushing and Navy Street sites will come thereafter.
So community residents have expressed concern about crowding at the York Street Station entrance and corridors. What measures are being considered to minimize adding ridership to this station, and what efforts, if any, would be made towards improvement recently identified as part of the ULURP consideration for 69 Adams Street?
Yeah, this is something that we've heard from the community as well. The Navy Yard has gone to great lengths and has expended a very significant amount of our not-for-profit resources to improve ferry, bike, bus, and our shuttle service that serve not just our tenants, but also the surrounding community as well. As an employment hub, it's of course important for us to connect to public transportation, and that is an imperative that we've taken especially seriously, as we have to ensure that the jobs that we're creating are accessible to all Brooklyn residents, not just those who live immediately around the yard, but really no matter where they live. And so to that end, our shuttle system, which we've invested in very heavily, connects the yard to 14 subway lines, as well as the Long Island Railroad. And the York Street F station is just one of those 14. And we did a very thorough analysis to make sure that we were connecting to as many train stations as possible, both to minimize the impact on any particular train station, but also to make sure that we could serve all Brooklyn residents, and that they could all, on a short subway ride, get access to the Navy Yard. In addition, there are a number of MTA bus lines that run adjacent to and also through the Navy Yard, but we've also engaged with the MTA as they work on their Brooklyn bus redesign project to ensure that the bus network connects even more Brooklyn residents to the job opportunities at the Navy Yard. And finally, this rezoning will effectively require us to update our extensive transportation management plan every 3 years into perpetuity to make sure that we're making the appropriate adjustments to our plan as facts change, both at the yard and in the surrounding community. As to the needed investments at the York Street Station, the Navy Yard has been and will continue to be supportive of efforts to improve public transportation, both at York Street and in the surrounding communities. And we look forward to working with the local community to make sure that the local transportation system gets the investments it needs.
So just one follow-up question regarding the shuttle, and you mentioned its connection to 14 subway lines. Do you have any sense of the split by how many people are using the shuttle from the various subway stations? So like, for example, is 10-20% affected by York Street based on how it services now? Do you have any sense on where the people are getting on the shuttle in terms of connecting to the subways?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm having connection problems. I hope I'm coming through clearly. We do. I don't have those off the top of my head, but we do collect that data, and we'd be happy to provide it to you as follow-up.
Thank you very much.
So it's Borough President Adams' policy to promote the use of renewable energy resources focused on advancing sustainable future in Brooklyn. It's also his policy to promote stormwater retention practices. What consideration has been given, possibly in cooperation with the Department of Environmental Protection, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, NYSERDA, or NYPA, to leveraging RFPs to realize the incorporation of blue, green, or white roofs, the installations such as solar panels and/or rooftop-mounted grid-connected batteries?
Yeah, this is something that we take very seriously, and we believe we've been a leader in this field and will continue to be throughout this master planning process. Currently, we're host to what we understand to be the second largest solar panel installation in the city. It's a 1 megawatt installation on one of our buildings. We have what we understand to be the only LEED platinum manufacturing building in the city, and I think perhaps the country. And we have the largest soil-based rooftop farm in the country. That rooftop farm, developed in partnership with DEP, manages 1 million gallons of rainwater runoff every year. We're also in conversations with the wind power industry about the appropriate role of the Navy Yard, our dry dock operator, and our tenants that those entities can play to support that high growth industry. And we continue to explore other similar programs around the yard. I would also say that we, in the past, have responded to RFPs and been successful in locating electric vehicle charging stations. I think that was 5 or 6 years ago. We're looking at adding more of those. So this is something that in the normal course we are focused on and will continue to be throughout the master plan. It's a little bit early to say exactly what will go on each roof of these buildings, but it's something that we have been and will continue to be focused on.
Thank you. Quick reminder to web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes. We will now call speakers on this item.
Okay, so we have 5 speakers, again via WebEx. Our first speaker is Keon Price.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings on behalf of the Brooklyn STEAM Center. At this time, we'd like to also thank Borough President Adams for his initial support getting this school started. Again, my name is Keon Price, and I currently serve as the founding principal of the New York City Department of Education's public high school program here in Brooklyn, here in Building 77, the Brooklyn STEAM Center. As a proud Brooklynite who grew up in Crown Heights, attended high school at George Westinghouse High School here in downtown Brooklyn, and has worked on the Navy Yard now for the past 3 years, I'm incredibly proud to be a member of this community and a partner to the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation. Like so many New Yorkers whose community has been significantly impacted by COVID-19, which has only accentuated the deep public health and economic inequities, I'm eternally grateful for the Brooklyn Navy Yard's support in helping us meet the needs of our school community. Over the past 18 months, and since our inception, the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation has procured grants, purchased wireless hotspots, technology devices, food and delivery services to help us survive, and our scholars thrive throughout the pandemic. When the DOE was slow to respond, the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation has jumped in to help us immediately provide our community and significantly lowered the loss of learning time most students experienced early last year. During the beginning of the shutdown, the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation placed a call out to their employee community and partnered with our school to utilize the manufacturing equipment in our space to produce masks and ventilator parts during a nationwide shortage. To recover, grow, and thrive as a city, we need to invest in proven models for economic growth for everyone. And I feel the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation's master plan does just that. The Brooklyn Navy Yard has proven that it can successfully bridge the gap between workforce development, education, private industry, and the public sector to create light manufacturing jobs that support New Yorkers from many different backgrounds. I'm so excited to see how the special district will make the yard more open to my community with new public spaces, expanded educational programming, which we're looking forward to. And I'm proud to be a part of the Brooklyn Navy Yard community, and I support its plan to realize its nonprofit model for job growth. Thank you to the members of the community of the board for hearing my testimony, and I submit this evening. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laurie Raphael.
Good evening to the Borough President and staff. My name is Laurie Raphael. I'm Senior Vice President at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Brooklyn Navy Yard this evening. The Brooklyn Chamber is in full support of the zoning text and map amendments that will allow for the creation and mapping of the special Brooklyn Navy Yard district. The yard has been and continues to be a major generator of good jobs in Brooklyn that support our working families with top-notch workforce development programs and light manufacturing employment opportunities. The zoning amendment will allow the yard to remain on the growth track outlined in the 2018 master plan, which was developed with extensive community input to get to 30,000 jobs. The special district designation is needed to allow the yard to modernize the campus and allow for the construction of buildings optimized for today's manufacturing needs. to allow for increased community access and to better connect the community to jobs, training, and the potential for benefits such as affordable child care and educational spaces. The Brooklyn Navy Yard is a responsive and responsible community partner for the creation of jobs, the ability to attract quality employers, and the increased access to the surrounding neighborhoods. This project has the full support of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rebecca Cohen.
Good evening. Thank you to the Borough President and staff for allowing me to speak. I am the Executive Director and co-founder of Brooklyn Book Bodega. We are a local nonprofit increasing the number of 100 plus book homes for kids 0 to 18 in New York City. So we provide books, build community, and create a passion for learning through free events and literacy-based community programming. Like so many New Yorkers, our community was hit hard by the COVID pandemic. As an organization focusing on youth, we saw the devastating impact on children as they faced isolation and total disruption to normal childhood endeavors, and we knew we had to do something. Prior to the pandemic, we had partnered with the Brooklyn Navy Yard to host big book parties where we gave away books to babies, kids, teens, families, teachers. At our January 2020 event, we welcomed visitors from all 5 boroughs and 43 different zip codes to Building 77. On average, we give out 1,600 books to more than 200 people at each public giveaway. On March 13th, we paused as a city, as a state, and our March 15th event was canceled, and we had a host of books gathering dust. Thanks to our partnership with the Navy Yard, we were able to quickly pivot from in-person gatherings to book distribution, something that we had not yet attempted at a large scale. Through the Yard's in-kind space donation, use of the loading dock, and supportive staff at many levels through events, exhibitions, leasing, security, and community engagement, we have been able to give out over 55,000 books to just about 15,000 people during the pandemic. Recently, Brooklyn Navy Yard leased space to our organization at a very low cost, allowing us to begin to grow the roots necessary to become an enduring Brooklyn institution. Just 2 years ago, we were a new organization without any funding or a permanent home. The Navy Yard sees the value in our work and our ability to engage the community. Their investment in us and our vision of a world where all kids can access books regardless of their family's socioeconomic status has allowed us to realize our dream. We unequivocally believe in the mission of the Brooklyn Navy Yard and their vision of a workforce development programs and light manufacturing that support middle-class jobs for New Yorkers from many different backgrounds. We are delighted with the vision for the special district as it will only welcome more people into the Yard with new public space and expanded educational programming. I and our organization are proud to call the Navy Yard home, and we support its plans to further realize its nonprofit model for job growth. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sharon Pope Marshall.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Good evening. On behalf of Bike New York, my name is Sharon Pope Marshall, Director of Community Outreach. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you in support of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Master Plan. Bike New York is a proud tenant of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We trust that you will support the master plan as we do. Bike New York empowers New Yorkers to transform their lives and their communities through bicycling. One of our core principles is to empower adults and youth to lead healthy, productive lives. In 2019, Bike New York taught free bike education classes to more than 20,000 New Yorkers, teaching our students how to ride a bike and how to do so safely and confidently. We continue to teach, providing a hybrid of virtual sessions as well as in-person sessions. And that's for 2020 and 2021. The Brooklyn Navy Yard comprises a waterfront asset. we are thrilled that the master plan will facilitate public access to the waterfront while maintaining the safety and operational integrity of the working waterfront. 450 businesses call the Brooklyn Navy Yard its home. Like the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Bike New York is committed to participating in the collective and collaborative efforts of Brooklyn's post-pandemic recovery. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed deep public health and economic inequalities, issues we at Bike New York are embracing. For example, in collaboration with City Bike and One Community, Bike New York trains formerly incarcerated individuals for employment as bicycle mechanics. These are jobs that are in demand right now. Locally, an energizing symbiotic relationship exists between the Brooklyn Navy Yard and its surrounding communities. A yes vote will enable the Brooklyn Navy Yard to further engage neighborhoods with workforce development programs such as ours, centered within a community integrated manufacturing and educational campus. Together, let's further strengthen our journey toward a robust post-economic recovery and renewal. Please support the Brooklyn Navy Yard's master plan. My name is Sharon Pope Marshall with Bike New York. Thank you very much for taking the time this evening to listen to our remarks and comments.
Our next speaker is Nikki Russ.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nikki Russ Federman. I'm the 4th generation owner of Russ & Daughters, my family's 107-year-old appetizing business, the home of bagels and lox in New York since 1914. I'm also a born and bred and fiercely proud Brooklynite, and I'm raising my family in Park Slope in the same neighborhood I grew up in, and my daughter's attending the same public school that I attended. In the past 7 years, my cousin, who is also my business partner, and I have expanded Russ & Daughters beyond our historic Lower East Side shop. It now includes 2 restaurants, Russ & Daughters Cafe, Russ & Daughters at the Jewish Museum, and Russ & Daughters Brooklyn. In 2018, we brought Russ & Daughters to Brooklyn and built out an 18,000 square foot space in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. This has become our headquarters, the site of our bakery, nationwide shipping facility, commissary kitchens, warehouses, offices, as well as a retail counter serving Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Navy Yard and the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation offered several compelling reasons to bring Russ & Daughters Brooklyn to the yard. Ample space, typically hard to find in New York City at a sustainable rate, ease of doing business, proximity to our other locations, the BNDYC's non-traditional role as more of a partner than a landlord, and the yard's fabulous employment center, and the ability to secure a long-term home for our headquarters without feeling the short-term squeeze of the for-profit real estate market. Typically, businesses that need a significant amount of space are forced to move their operation outside of the city, the tri-state area. It's been an incredible boon to be able to grow Russ & Daughters right in the heart of the city and continue our 107-year-old dedication to this city. The Navy Yard's unique role as a nonprofit dedicating to supporting and promoting its businesses and job growth is not just talk. It's how the yard is run. The Yard has consistently demonstrated to us their commitment to helping Russ and Daughters survive and thrive. It's no exaggeration to say that our space at the Brooklyn Navy Yard is what saved Russ and Daughters during the pandemic. The BNYDC kept the yard open. Sorry, it was truly incredible. Off topic, but I mean off the letter, because I just want to say it was truly incredible what the yard did during the pandemic. It kept the gates and business open without disruption, recognizing that many of the tenants, including Russ and Daughters, were essential businesses. So we were able to keep operating, delivering our food directly to individuals and frontline workers in New York City and around the country. With ample space at the yard, our staff felt comfortable coming to work throughout COVID, and we were able to take on a significant growth in our nationwide shipping business while our 2 restaurants were shut down and retail business was drastically reduced. The Brooklyn Navy Yard is an incredible ecosystem of the most interesting, innovative, creative, and diverse New Yorkers. In this sense, it is a microcosm of the best of New York. Being a part of the Brooklyn Navy Yard campus has helped us form relationships and learning opportunities with businesses we wouldn't otherwise have had. We participated in the Yard's free business growth and development cohort program, collaborated with other tenants to create several new products and services, established friendships with many fellow tenants where we help each other out, and gave internships and part-time jobs to STEAM Center students in the culinary track. And I'm very proud that one of those students who I recommended is just finished his first year at West Point. Continued expansion of the Yard will allow even more businesses to have the best chance of successfully growing their business in New York and take advantage of the incredible opportunities that being a part of this campus provides. This is why I fully support the Navy Yard's special district application. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Abby Gonzalez.
10th grader in the Brooklyn STEAM Center's Film and Media Pathway. I have graduated this past June, and I am joining the music industry program at Dillard University in the fall. Like many other scholars at the Brooklyn STEAM Center, I've been able to work with the Navy Yard companies throughout my entire education. For example, last summer, the Navy Yard hosted a summer internship for the Brooklyn STEAM scholars and connected us with ULURP, which is a production company that is located in building 77 of the Navy Yard. They allowed us to use their space to film our projects. We worked directly with the ULURP staff to improve our films and our knowledge of films, which I will be able to carry on throughout my career. This summer, the Navy Yard has provided us with internships in audio engineering that I will be applying myself to as well, so I'm very thankful for that. Being on the Navy Yard has put me in proximity with employers on a daily basis, and over the last 2 years, I've become a part of the community, from walking through the food hall in Building 77 and getting to know many of the employees at Russ and Daughters, getting to know security and other staff members, loading equipment and materials onto the freight elevator. This has really shown me how important the special district is to continue growth of the Navy Yard and allow many other businesses to come on. We need this to facilitate multiple projects, especially with the STEAM Center and expanding our materials for different pathways of the STEAM Center. So I really hope that you are taking this into consideration, because this will definitely benefit not only the businesses, but the students that are applying themselves to the program and the students that are applying themselves to work at these businesses. I've loved my time at the Brooklyn Navy Yard and at the Brooklyn STEAM Center, and I'm very excited to see the space grow so that again, the students could take advantage of that and thrive. So thank you very much for allowing me to testify. I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. I believe those are all the speakers that we have on this item at this time. If we receive additional requests, we will reopen this item.
Richard, would you like to close the item?
Calendar item number 3 is closed. Calendar item number 4, 210119ZMK, 210120ZRK.
These applications submitted by PAB Third Avenue Holdings LLC for zoning map and text amendments affecting block 1020, lots 34 through 36, 39, 40 through 45, and block 1026, lots 32 through 37, 40 and 42 in Brooklyn Community District 6. The proposed zoning map amendment would change an M21 district to C4-4A to facilitate a new 18,000 square foot, 5-story commercial office development at 506 3rd Avenue, and the enlargement of 530 3rd Avenue to a 6-story, 39,338 square foot commercial building with approximately 10,000 square feet of ground floor retail. The zoning text amendment would create a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the affected properties. No parking would be required or provided under the proposed C4-4A district. Community Board 6 approved this application on July 6, 2021. We remind web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. We will call speakers after the presentation and question and answer session. Would Eric Palatnik, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
I would love to. Thank you for having me. My name is Eric Palatnik, and I am a lawyer representing Paul Basile and his family in this rezoning application. And I believe you have a presentation of ours, if you could pull it. That's great. We're proud to be here in a presentation that's uniquely similar to the project you just had in front of you, creating Brooklyn Dreammaker Studios, which is the continuation of what the Basile family has been doing in the neighborhood for years. And what we're at before today is for a rezoning to change the property that I'm going to show you in a second from a M21 zoning district to an C4-4A zoning district, which is an R7A equivalent. Next slide, please. These are the properties that are involved. There are 2 sites. There's 506 3rd Avenue, which you're looking at right here, which is an old oil company where they had the trucks there. Right now, Prop to Cup, which is a coffee company that's in there right now at the ground floor. We're proposing to rezone this site and the next site. If you can go to the next site, please. Next page. Oh, there's another image of this site. I apologize. This is showing you what the site looks like. I think that's good. You can keep it there for a second. Thank you for staying with me. This is showing you an image of what 506 3rd Avenue will look like if it should be approved. The next slide, please. This gives you a picture of 530 3rd Avenue, which is the second site. The second site is on the block that's to the left of the first site, and it has 3 properties involved with it. 2 that sit on the side street on 13th and 12th Streets. Those are the 2 sites at the bottom. And 1 that's already built at 530 3rd Avenue. I'll show you this a little more clearly in a second. The Basile family owns all 3 properties. They were able to construct the building that's existing in the middle of 530 3rd Avenue, utilizing the development rights from the 2 buildings at the bottom. If the act is acted upon and ordered and approved, the 2 buildings you see at the bottom will rise in height, hopefully, to 2 6-story buildings, which will be similar in nature to the 6-story building you see in front of you right there. Next slide, please. This gives you an image here of what the buildings will look like, as well as their shared common space. The buildings are dream maker spaces, which is essentially very small businesses, include artists and other crafts makers. Those businesses need a communal type of space to work, similar to what you just saw at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So what the Basile family is presenting to you tonight is something very similar to what you just saw, in the sense that it's a shared workspace where users can have their own individual space to work, but they can collaborate with other users, whether it be in the common area that you see here or in various facilities around the buildings. I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Next slide, please. This gives you a good idea for what the rezoning area is and what we're asking to do. The left side of the screen is the existing zoning. The right side is the proposed. Equally as important when you see these slides is the Site 1 and Site 2 are highlighted there. Site 2, which is at the bottom of the screen in both slides, is the T-shaped lot that I mentioned a moment ago, where you have the existing building on the lot that utilize the air rights. Site 1 is a freestanding lot that's all by itself. It's important to note that all of the other properties that you see up and down the block there are all basically residential properties. Also across the street from us, you can see is an R6A district in one portion and an M12. On the right side of the screen, you can see that we're proposing to rezone the area to a C44A zoning district. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's an R7A equivalent, and what it will allow for is to have commercial uses within the building, the dream maker uses, spaces, uses that I'm talking about. And I'll start to show you some examples in a minute. Next slide, please. Here you can see on the left side what's existing, on the right side what's proposed as far as the zoning goes. Basically, I'm speaking to a very knowledgeable crowd here, so you all know what an M21 district would allow for. A C44A allows for a mix of both commercial and or residential. It is proposed to be an entirely commercial development, what we are proposing. We're not proposing any residential. But we're proposing the C44A because, as I mentioned a moment ago, the block has no commercial on the block. So the C44A is a mixed zone that allows both residential and commercial. It really serves as a nice buffer between the more intense industrial business zones that are around us and the manufacturing and the residential and the R6A that's across the street. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of what Paul Basile and his family is all about. Basically, they're a family-owned business that's been in operation for 40 years. Their whole key to their success is a trust with their tenants. They primarily have very small businesses, a lot of startups, a lot of mom and pops, a lot of minority women-owned businesses, a lot of people taking advantage of the Amazon era, where you're able to produce and manufacture in a small space and then have FedEx and UPS come and pick it up and ship it. So you don't need an entire shipping department. That's basically what Paul is creating, and I'll go through a little more of his spaces in a moment. Next slide, please. It's just a little bit more about the Basile family, but I'm going to skip through this in the sake of time. Next slide, please. This gives an example of some of their projects. I'll skip through that in the sense of time because the next slide shows it all. This shows you what the Basile family has been up to. They've been very hard at work since they immigrated into the country in the last generation of their family. And they've accumulated quite a few properties, and these are all the dots representing them. The block that has the word sites owned by Paul Basile is the block that we are really talking about, which is third between 12th and 13th. As you can see, they own pretty much the entirety of the block. Most of their tenants are small business operators that I mentioned a moment ago, similar to what you just heard very well described in the other application. And Paul has built his reputation on a trust with these people, and is proud to say has lost almost no tenants during COVID and accommodated almost every single person that asked any sort of accommodation. Next slide, please. So you can see here, this is what I was mentioning a moment ago. This shows you the slides that are Paul's properties. Site 2 is at the tip of it. You can see on the right side of the screen is Site 1. He does not own most of that block, but it gives you an idea for who Paul is and who the applicant is and how committed they are to this neighborhood. Of interest in this picture, you can see some of the taller buildings that surround us, including on the left side of the screen, you can see the word Paul's Properties, a 7-story brick building, which is a community facility building. And you can see over by Site 1 across the street, a relatively new 6-story residential building that was built. So the proposal that we're asking for fits within. If you could skip forward, next slide. This slide is a great slide to stop on. This shows you the rents that Paul has been charging and what he does for the tenancies that are located within his buildings. His rents for light industrial market rate is $28. He charges, you can see there in the middle in the white part, $8 to $18 a square foot for manufacturing and light industrial. He's about $10 or $20 below market. Similarly, he's about 30% below market for artist and creative space. And we all know, as the last few presentations, there's a big demand for artist and creative space. So Paul is doing that here. That's what we're trying to create. We're trying to build Brooklyn. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of tendencies within the buildings right now. You might not know who they are, but you can sort of get the gist very quickly of what I said before, that they're small businesses that are local to Brooklyn. Crop to Cup, which is a coffee shop I've mentioned before, Transmitter Media, Brooklyn Grooming, which has very unique personal grooming care products that are produced here in Brooklyn. There are a whole bunch of different local businesses, the types of things you would want to see in your neighborhood and expand. And they're actually run by people who live in the neighborhood as well. So people are living here and working here. Heck with me, do it all right here. Next slide, please. These are just some of the testimonials. We asked, we put together, sort of like a Broadway show kind of thing to show how great the family has been and Paul has been. All of these testimonials speak to the fact that there's been a trust with the applicant, and none of the tenants have ever had to worry about if they're going to lose space because they can't make their rent or any other problems they might have. Paul partners with them, not economically, but in a very strong, supportive fashion. And he's done that in all of his properties. Next slide. Here we're just showing you again the examples of his relationships with people. We're showing you here that all of these relationships for these tenancies have been 20 years, 10 years, 15 years, trying to establish with you that there's a high level of trust among tenants and Paul, and also that we hope that you would trust Paul to grant the rezoning and let him build what he wants to build to service this. You can skip to the next slide, please. And I'll just let you skip a few slides forward. If you just go right to the one that says Gowanus Neighborhood Plan and Gowanus IBZ Vision Plan. One more, I think. There you go. Now, this is an important, go back one. There you go. Thank you. This, I'm skipping a few slides because I don't want to waste your whole night here. This gives you an idea. You've all been actively involved in the Gowanus rezoning. I'm sure there's many people on the phone who know more about the Gowanus rezoning than I even know. But basically what we're showing you here is that what we are proposing is consistent with the Gowanus neighborhood plan and the IBZ recommendations for 3rd Avenue, and to some extent is symbiotic with the Gowanus rezoning, in the sense that what's been discussed the whole time through has been to create some sort of buffer area between the more intense manufacturing areas where there's residential and more of an urban sort of flair to it rather than a hardcore commercial manufacturing flair. And this is what you see here in the quotes on the right, that especially at the bottom right, that there's a quote paper that along 3rd Avenue, which is this stretch, officials hope to see residential mixed-use development, including multi-story commercial buildings. The west side has been zoned industrial for many decades, and many of the residential buildings predate the zoning. So what this is trying to say, and what we've been saying, is that what we're proposing here mimics what people have been discussing, which is to create this buffer zone that will be a soft entry into the harder manufacturing areas and still allow people to live nearby without being interfered with by forklifts and trucks. Next slide, please. Here we give you just a narrative of what's going on around us. You can see the area in more detail. Clearly you can see the row houses, typical Brooklyn 4-story row houses that surround us on each side. Again, I'm trying to draw the understanding here, or to clearly demonstrate to you that this side of the block where we are is not an industrial side of a block, nor is it a quiet residential side of the block, because it's got a lot of manufacturing behind it, but rather it's the buffer zone, as I've been saying. Next slide. It just reinforces what I was speaking to a moment ago, just starting to show you in more detail the rezoning area. Site 2 is on the left, it's shaped like a T, and Site 1 is on the right, and we're showing here the heights of the buildings that are front on 3rd Avenue, which is primarily 3-story brownstones or row houses. We're also clearly showing you what the heights of our buildings will be next to those. Next slide, please. This slide we put together just to give you an idea of the mixture of an array of building heights that occupy the neighborhood. As you can see, our buildings, which are about 75 feet, fit really squarely within the smattering of buildings in the neighborhood, which the numbers show you range anywhere from 60 feet up to 100 feet, 120 feet, with most of them resting right around the height we are. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend much time on the ground because I've shown you a lot of pictures. I think you are all very familiar with the blocks. So unless anybody has any other questions about the pictures, I'll ask if you can skip forward all the way to the page where the plans are, which is, you can pretty much stop at page. They're not labeled, but you can stop right at the sustainable features page. You can stop there. Go back 1 second. That'll be great. We can show the zoning change. That'll be helpful. So this gives you more detail. Again, I've already showed it to you. The zoning district change. You can see here on the left side, it's M21. On the right side, showing you the rezoning area C44A. And now if you can skip forward, shows you the tax map, shows you the radius diagram. This you've seen already. Next slide. Some sustainable features that we just wanted to call out to you. Obviously, things that I think are very commonplace in most applications nowadays: green roofs, energy savings appliances, high efficiency lights, solar panels, things of that nature. Next slide. And this shows you with a little bit of color. It gives you an idea of the green roof that we're proposing, at least on the 506 3rd Avenue site. We'll show you the courtyard in a moment on the 530 site. Next slide, please. This shows you 506 3rd, again, in more detail with the roof, and shows you what the idea of it will be to have a communal area for people to utilize. Next slide, please. Here you can see that we're showing you here at 530 3rd, giving you an idea of what the courtyard will look like when everything is completed. Next slide. It gives you some more idea for that, so you get a good feeling of the color and the imagery that will be put in there. This is a green wall that we're proposing for the buildings that are on 12th and 13th Streets. The buildings that are at 12th and 13th, their side, you see with the green, faces the rear yard of the residential buildings that are on 3rd Avenue. So we are proposing a green wall that will be horticulturally maintained, designed, and operated in a way that will maintain being green and yet not damage the wall itself. Next slide, please. Showing you here where trucks or the loading berths would be at the ground floor for each site, where if there was a panel truck delivery of any sort, they could come in. There really is no intention to have any trucks come in. This is really more if somebody is offloading any equipment they need or any supplies that they need. It's a place for them to come into. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of the different minority women-owned businesses that are involved, as well as the local businesses that are involved. Any of the businesses that are tenancies within the building are either minority or women-owned, and that is what we are trying to show you here. Next slide, please. Now we're in the plans, which you pretty much come to see already as we've gone through the proposal, but I'll show them to you in a little more detail. Next slide, please. This is 506. It's a relatively straightforward 5-story building. It'll have approximately 18,000 square feet, including 2,300 square feet at the ground floor. At the beginning of the presentation, the comment was made, I was probably read off as something, there'll be retail at the ground floor. There really is no retail proposed. All of the spaces are really proposed to be maker spaces. Next slide, please. And here you can see again the different perspective of the building. Very tastefully designed and well suited for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And that's the idea for this. Click forward. Get the same gist the whole way through. Click forward, maybe one more. We can show you a floor plan. We'll show you an elevation. The elevation of it, you understand, it's the building's gonna be 75 feet tall, 5 stories. And the next slide should give you a good example for the different spaces. One more. And here you see how things are broken up with studio and commercial spaces, smaller spaces at the upper floors, with the larger spaces at the ground floor. If you click forward a few slides, you can get to the next building. You'll see the imagery for it. One more. 530 3rd Avenue. This is the building that already exists. This is the one you saw in the pictures that I said he developed utilizing the development building behind him. And next slide, please. And what you're looking at, next slide. There you go. This is 12th Street, 138 12th Street. It's a 6-story building that's proposed, and it'll stand about 77 feet, and that was the one that has the green wall on the left side. It's not shown here, but is what we're proposing. Next slide, please. And here you're seeing the 13th Street property, which is 135 13th Street. Again, similar to what you just saw on 12th Street. And if you click forward a few slides, just give you some more imagery of it so you can get a perspective of it. And this slide was here. Again, we're stopping here to show you the communal space that's in between all the buildings. It's proposed to be shared. And then there's a space within the buildings where there's place for people to gather. That's essentially the proposal. We have more plans that we could show you, but I know you have a busy evening, and I'd be happy to pause here and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I think you addressed this in your presentation, but given the applicant's intent to develop a commercial office building, why request a residential district as opposed to one that does not permit residential development?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unlike the Brooklyn Navy Yard that you just had a few minutes ago and you heard, where they created a special district to themselves, as well as Gowanus, you may have heard, where they have a special district created. We didn't create a special district here because the rezoning action was not big enough. So we're forced to use whatever's on the table, on, so to speak, off the shelf from city planning's arsenal of rezoning tools. Here, the C44A is the proper district because it allows both residential and commercial to exist. And although there's no real, right now, desire, nor is there an intention, there is residential on the block and there is residential around us. And none of us know what the future may hold. So the C44A gives the opportunity to allow the building to initially, definitely, without a doubt, be filled 100% commercially for the foreseeable future. But it also allows the building to transition, if it should need, or to use a modern day word, pivot, if the issue should come up, into something that's also could be equally useful for the neighborhood if that time should come. But Mr. Bazile is steadfast, committed to doing commercial space here, and there is no desire, intention, nor will he be selling or flipping the property or anything of that nature. We'll be building these buildings for commercial use. That's his plan.
And what mechanism would ensure that the proposed development is constructed as represented today?
The best we could do to guarantee it to you is to promise you that we are going to be filing on all of the buildings an industrial commercial incentive program filing for a tax abatement. That requires annual filings to demonstrate that the building is being utilized commercially. It also carries with it very substantial tax benefits. Paul is 100% committed to that, and he'd be happy to put it in writing to you that he will be applying for that, and that should hopefully, once it's enacted, give you the assurances that it will be maintained commercially, as he'll have to file reporting documents every year.
Thank you. During Borough President Adams' public hearing on the Gowanus rezoning, testimony was provided by several businesses, including many musicians, concerned about potential displacement. To what extent would the proposed building be earmarked for artisan and other maker uses consistent with the proposed Gowanus mix? And could it serve as a relocation resource for displaced businesses?
Yes, and we love music in particular, so bring the musicians over. Let the bands play. The idea of this building is exactly that. For those types of users, for the small independent user that might not be able to find a home in one of the larger buildings of Red Hook or Sunset Park with larger manufacturing buildings, but rather a small individual or a couple of people that have a business going that need an 800 square foot space and could thrive in it. That's exactly who we're searching for. We'd welcome them. And as I mentioned earlier, Paul charges naturally a lower rent than the market, and that's not a gimmick for the rezoning. That's been what he's been doing for decades already with all of his tenancies. So we'd be happy to welcome them.
So I know you addressed this in your presentation, but it's Borough President Adams' policy to promote the use of sustainable and renewable energy resources, focusing on advancing a sustainable future in Brooklyn. It's also his policy to promote practices to retain stormwater runoff. What consideration has been given, possibly in cooperation with the Department of Environmental Protection, Mayor's Office of Sustainability, NYSERDA or NYPA, to the incorporation of blue, green, or white roofs, and installation of solar panels and or grid-connected batteries on the roof as part of the intended development?
A lot of that is supposed to be included. I don't know if you saw within the proposal. I didn't even make note of the solar panels that were shown on the roof. The roofs will be landscaped. One of the buildings will be landscaped. All of the water will be collected. We've hired a landscape architect who has been designing a water retention network so that the water could be conserved and saved on site, reutilized for the landscaping to water that. Also, there will be bioswales. They'll be utilizing, of course, the most modern and up-to-date energy-efficient systems, as well as with windows that have B ratings that could keep the heat in the winter and out in the summer. So there's quite a few features that Paul is implementing and will be utilizing. It's not just good for the environment, but it helps keep his bills down. So he's more than happy to participate in it.
And it's Borough President Adams' policy to maximize quality jobs for Brooklynites. Please outline what steps will be taken to ensure the inclusion and participation of minority and woman-owned businesses, enterprises, and/or local business enterprises in the construction process.
Right. I mentioned during the presentation that a lot of his tenancies are there, but some of his tenancies are also builders, and he will be using them. And he is committed verbally, and would be happy to put in writing, that he's happy to utilize local labor from Brooklyn, which he will be utilizing, very local labor in the building, the actual construction, as well as local building supplies, as well as relying upon minority women-owned business enterprises that he's already has relationships with, as well as any other new ones that come his way to construct the buildings.
Thank you. Just want to remind, Richard, do you have any? Okay. We remind web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes. We'll now call speakers on this item.
Okay, it looks like we have no speakers on this item at this time. Therefore, we can move on to item number 5 on the agenda.
Okay. Richard, would you like to close the item?
Okay, so calendar item number 4 is closed. Going on to calendar number 5, 210276 ZMK, 210277 ZRK.
These applications, submitted by Atlantic Brooklyn LLC for zoning map and text amendments affecting an approximately 44,000 square foot assemblage on the south side of Atlantic Avenue between Classen and Franklin Avenues in Brooklyn Community District 3. The zoning map amendment would change the project area from M1-1 to a C6-A district. The zoning text amendments would establish an MIH area coterminous with the rezoning boundary and permit the applicant to widen the sidewalk fronting the proposed development. The requested actions would enable a 17-story building with 426 dwelling units, of which 126 would be affordable pursuant to MIH options 2 and 4. The development would provide approximately 63,000 square feet of commercial uses on the first and second floors and 152 parking spaces in the cellar. Community Board 3 approved this application on June 28, 2021, with a modification to the requested zoning. We remind web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. We will call speakers after the presentation and question and answer session. Would Tucker Reed, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Yeah. Good evening. With your permission, I'm Gordon Bell from the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, and I'm going to introduce Tucker and the team. Restoration has been around for, as you know, over 50 years. We were important and very concerned about the zoning for Fulton Street and the development that we've been pursuing in the past 10 years to bring a significant amount of affordable housing to Fulton Street and to Bed-Stuy at a time when it's incredibly important that we are successful in doing so. Tonight's team, we have Totem. Totem is Tucker Reed, the gentleman you named, Vivian Lau, and Elizabeth Canella. We also have a team, St. Nick's Alliance, and the head of real estate, Frank Lang, gentleman with whom we've worked closely on multiple projects to increase the affordable housing and increase the effectiveness of our work as community partners and liaisons and not-for-profits. We're delighted tonight to also bring you this project at 1045 Atlantic. It's a special location. You know, it's a summer night. We're the last group to go before you guys go home, I think, and we don't want to be long, but we want to be impactful and share everything we need to share so you have a strong understanding of this project. You know, the Masons built Florence, Italy, and Paris, France. The Eiffel Tower was a Mason. And they understood the right perspective of sky and visibility and building height and sidewalk length. Our architect and our team have really worked hard to be deeply connected to our community, Community Board 3. And for the past 2 years and 5 meetings, some of them that went on later than this one, we got into the details of what they needed to learn or teach or share so that we could respond. And so tonight's presentation will be led by Totem. Before I give it to Vivian and Tucker and Elizabeth, I want to share that we understand that mixing affordable housing and market rate housing is kind of important in this environment. We understand that making sure we have affordable retail commercial space along with our market rate commercial space is crucial to the local businesses who need to be a part of this development, part of this building, part of our community. And we seek to optimize the structure and size of this project, and we'll continue to advocate for a project that has been shaped, structured, and carved to be a good fit for community needs. And I'm excited to say the 31-0 unanimous vote from CB3 was an endorsement of the work we've accomplished together. And we hope that tonight we can share this with you right now.
Thanks so much, Gordon. And we can just go to our presentation now as well. My name is Vivian Liao, and I'm one of the principals of Totem. We want to thank the Borough President and his team for having us here tonight. We wanted to start with a little bit of an introduction to our firm. You can go to the next slide. Totem is a company that we founded more than 5 years ago, bringing our collective experience in government, urban design, and real estate to focus on local projects that benefit communities. The common thread tying our projects together is the approach we take to centering the voices of communities in which we work. As a group of former public servants, we see the opportunity to leverage the power of the marketplace to create lasting benefits for the community. We're literally trying to chart a new way of development, one building at a time. This slide shows the hallmarks of a Totem development, how we're trying to build intentionally and with the community in mind, focused on a few key principles: building affordable housing, increasing opportunities for economic mobility and jobs, what we call inclusive infrastructure, which is really innovative ideas to enhance the communities where we're working, and sustainability, cutting edge innovation to make our buildings responsible for the communities. On the next slide, you see how these principles will be put into action specifically at 1045 Atlantic Avenue. It has our hallmark affordability and jobs focus, but we're also very proud of some of the innovations we are proposing specifically for this project, some of them new to us as well, around inclusive infrastructure and green design, which we'll talk more about in depth in a moment. But you don't have to take just our word for the benefits this project will bring. As you know, with regard to height, bulk, and affordability, many of those will be memorialized in the zoning process. But for the others, it is standard practice for our firm to create community benefits agreements, which we plan to do here as well with our partners at Restoration. Now I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Tucker Reed, to introduce you to the specifics of this project. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vivian. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just to orient ourselves to the site, we're using the working address of 1045 Atlantic, but it's actually a 5-parcel assemblage on Atlantic Avenue between Franklin and Clausen, as demonstrated here. The existing character of many of the buildings is kind of underutilized industrial. Many of the buildings in the footprint are actually vacant today. There are a couple of legacy uses around automotive repair and plumbing supplies that will be closing down in the next year. Next slide, please. Vivian, I think, gave a nice overview of our firm and how we approach things, but one of the big pieces of what we do is, we're all Brooklynites. We know these neighborhoods intuitively, but we really like to dig into the data. And so, we pay a lot of attention to planning documents that city agencies or CBOs have been working on in the locales where we're focusing our projects. We paid close attention to the Bedford-Stuyvesant housing plan, where, over the course of the year, HPD gathered feedback on how to preserve affordability in Bed-Stuy using city-owned land. And if you go to the next slide, please, you can kind of see that they found a number of important things, specifically showing that Bed-Stuy households has varying incomes across households, but we overlaid the change in incomes from 2005 to 2015, and really noticed that the the kind of middle or low to middle moderate income housing needs were not being addressed by the marketplace. And so we've really tried to target modifying the off-the-shelf MIH program, really tried to target it here to income bands ranging from 40 to 100% of AMI to really help address that kind of acute need in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. One of the other kind of great data points here, if you look at, the number of units that have been built in specifically Community Board 3 over the last, 7 to 8 years, there's been close to 300 projects, almost 3,200 units of market rate housing that have been developed in Community Board 3. But when you juxtapose that on the next slide to the number of affordable units that have been built using the voluntary inclusionary housing program, to the best of our knowledge, no MIH has been mapped here yet. It's a paltry sum. And so when you kind of look at them in aggregate on the next slide, you can kind of see almost 32 units of new construction housing, only 200 of which has been for affordable housing. And so we're really looking at this opportunity here in this site to harness the power of the marketplace to deliver affordable housing on this site that requires no city subsidy, no government support beyond the zoning change. So next slide, please. You can start to see, our very esoteric zoning map. I think on the next slide, you start to zero in on the 5 parcels that I mentioned that we own today. They are currently zoned on the next slide M11, and the zoning change request on the next slide is through a rezoning to a C63A that would provide for a mix of uses of both residential and commercial. Part of the reason that we arrived at the C63A zoning approach in close collaboration with the Department of City Planning was to be respectful of the M-Crown planning framework, which on the next slide, here's the land use map that kind of shows this, limited amount of industrial use, which you see in purple, really surrounded by the kind of sea of residential uses in yellow and orange. But if you go to the next slide, we paid very close attention to the M-Crown planning efforts that have gone on. We met with Community Board 3, I think half a dozen times over the last year to really arrive at a zoning approach here that was acceptable to them. Our site actually falls within what the framework called for higher density commercial uses, manufacturing uses. And we're flanked on either side in the planning framework here with higher density residential use in the red. And after consultation with Community Board 3, really heard that their priority is much more around the provision and creation of affordable housing on this site as opposed to higher density commercial uses. And we can talk a little bit more about that later in our presentation as well. But keep going, please. And we can transition into the proposed program of this building. On the next slide, you'll see how the C63A plays out on this site. A couple of interesting things to note here. We do plan to have first floor retail. And part of the priority in conversation with the community was to make sure that some of that retail was set aside for neighborhood entrepreneurs. So, working with our partners at Bed-Stuy Restoration, and you'll hear from Colvin Granum later, I think we'll speak a little bit more about this, but also a priority of the current council member, Robert Cornegie, that a significant portion of that retail be set aside and kind of carved up into smaller spaces for neighborhood entrepreneurs, neighborhood businesses to take space for retail use on the street. We've also, in trying to balance the not completely discount at all the M-Crown effort, we've tried to commit to a second story of commercial that could be a mix of office and kind of neighborhood services. So you could think of like educational or medical uses on the neighborhood services side, and then on the office side, again, catering to local small businesses that may be interested in opening up a commercial operation on site. And then the balance of the building would be multifamily, close to 300 units of which would be market rate at 294, and approximately 126 of which would be permanently affordable housing. And then on site, we also are offering accessory parking as a requirement of the zoning code, but we have some exciting ideas around bike parking, publicly accessible bike parking here as well, that we'll talk through later in the presentation. Next slide. Just a couple things to highlight before I turn it over to our architect, Bhaskar Srivastava, to go through the building program in more detail. But we really heard from Community Board 3 some priorities around light and air into the yards behind the site on Lefferts Place. And so we've really thought about using the trajectory of the sun as it moves across the sky to carve the building to try to maximize try to minimize shadows and maximize sunlight into those backyards. We've also put a real focus on sustainability planning, which you'll hear more about, not only in terms of green roofs and bioswales and things of that nature, but also in terms of how we terrace and set back the building and the materiality that we're using that we think are very interesting in terms of kind of forward-thinking building materials. And then on the privacy issue, really making sure that the windows of the building, there's really not a backside to this building because of the prominence of Atlantic Avenue and the Lefferts Place facing side. And so that the privacy, the way that the kind of terraces are oriented, really focus on north to west as opposed to north to south as opposed to east to west, so that they're obstructed views into the backyards to give our neighbors more privacy. With that, I'm going to ask Bhaskar to kind of take over and quickly talk through some more detail on the building program.
Thank you, Tucker. Next slide, please. So my name is Bhaskar. I'm the principal and founder of Density Works Architecture. What you see here is off-the-shelf proposed massing of an R9A building and what it would look like as proposed on Atlantic Avenue. So you're looking south up the sheet and down sheet is north. And you can see on the north side is a lower height district. First thing off the bat, what we decided, if you notice in the lower right-hand corner of the proposed building, is that our site goes past the mid-block line about 20 feet, where we have chosen not to put any structure in order to separate our building and load the massing more towards Atlantic Avenue and move the massing away from the low height district. Next slide, please. So in addition to the heights and setbacks that the basic zoning requires, we've gone above and beyond. And what you see here is the building is required to have a setback on Atlantic Avenue, but we have turned it around and brought the setbacks around the building towards the back. So you can see at both ends of the building is further set back than it needs to be. And what it allows for is less of a presence of the high-rise portion of the building. And in addition, you see the sun rays carving through the building and removing the massing so that we make the building lighter and allow for solar access into the backyards of the building. Next slide, please. And further, now you see the sun rays from the southwestern sky, and we let the sun, almost like laser beams, cut through the massing of the building and carve the massing to create a very unique massing on this building. Now this is above and beyond code. We have been very responsive to what we heard in the community board, at the community board, and we are responding to the privacy needs of our existing neighbors. So what we did, as you see at the bottom, is we would buffer all these setbacks with green roofs so that folks in the building cannot come up to the edge of the building, and it would create a privacy buffer between our building and the neighbors to the north. At the same time, it would create almost 50% of the building would be green roofs, and the next slide you will see how this impacts the design of the building. Almost 50% of the roofs that are facing the north would be buffered with green roofs, whereas the southern side would be the accessible roof for the tenants in the building, which we would have a very light, high albedo paving, which mitigates the urban heat island effect by reflecting the sun and creating these spaces that the tenants in the building can use, but push towards the southern side, allowing further privacy created by the green roof, which also helps the urban heat island effect and creates a more sustainable design. Next slide. The land use rationale was the wider the street, the more infrastructure and building height it can support. This is not new to us. In fact, most worldwide uses this rationale. The wider the street, the more infrastructure it can hold, and the higher building it can support. What you see on the screen here is the southwestern corner of this district. Most of the district is an R6A district with street widths of about 70 or 80 feet. It is a beautiful district, and parts of it is a landmark for an amazing street character that it has. But in the last few years, more density has been added on Fulton Street, for example, which is an 80 feet wide right-of-way. Using a similar rationale that a wide street could support more infrastructure. So staying in proportion with the land use rationale that was applied to Fulton Street, we would apply a similar rationale to Atlantic Avenue, which is 1.5 times the width of Fulton Street. So we are proposing a height and an FAR, which is 1.5 times of that on Fulton Street, giving us the C63A R9A proposal that you see here in our building design, which is a 175-foot tall building with an 8.5 FAR proposed on this side. Next slide, please. So here you see the proposed building relative to the street width of the right-of-way of Atlantic Avenue. In the background, you can see the elevated train line that we are right next to. And the building has a setback, as you can see, which is our base height, which is an homage to the height of the buildings on Fulton Street and a datum of the Armory building across the street. And beyond that, as we go up 3 or 4 floors, we further carve the building and lower it with green roofs to make it more sustainable, add another 30 inclusionary housing units in it to get to a height of 175 feet. The next slide. This is the view of the building looking towards downtown Brooklyn. And again, you can see how the street width of Atlantic Avenue can support this kind of a density, and how the building height is loaded on the wide street, whereas the back of the building is carved down to allow sunlight district on the north. And the next slide, please. This is the street character of the project that we are envisioning, how to make the sidewalk. We have a 370-foot long sidewalk. How do you make it hospitable to pedestrians? We are seeking a transit-oriented development here with the workforce housing option. People should have clean, friendly access to the mass transit that is less than a block away. So we are making the streets very pedestrian-friendly. We are providing a sidewalk widening that allows for local businesses to spill out onto a private portion of the lot. At the same time, it allows for a wider reading of the sidewalk, some continuous rain protection that allows for street animation, people to walk along this long sidewalk. On the right, you can see the DEP. We would coordinate with DEP to provide the rain garden design for a number of trees that we could host on this long sidewalk. And these rain gardens would catch the runoff from the wide Atlantic Avenue and retain the water before it is let out into the city sewers and causing a burden on the infrastructure. So this overall is the character of the street we are proposing. And in the building design, you can see we are proposing a regenerated, sustainably harvested wood cladding to create a very unique profile that merges really well with the brownstone district that we kind of bookend in this community district. With this, I would like to turn it back to Tucker for the rest of the features of the building.
Thanks, Bhaskar. If we could go to the next slide, I'll briefly touch on some of the community benefits. The next slide. we'll go through the housing. Next slide. On the affordability side, just to show the kind of range of rents that we're expecting at the 40 to 100% of AMI range, really down to about $750 at the 40% of AMI and up to $2,100 for a 1-bedroom. Obviously it is a big priority for us and I think for our partners at Restoration and at St. Nick's that as many of these units as possible go to local residents of Bedford-Stuyvesant. Obviously there's a 50% community board preference for CB3, but we'll be making real efforts to try to market these units to get as many people from Community Board 3 prepped and kind of into the lottery for this site as possible. And again, these units will be permanently affordable, right? There's many people understand with the MIH program that these units are in perpetuity designated as affordable housing. On the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the income levels that are associated with that. Like I said, we've really tried to modify the MIH program here and target the AMIs between 40 to 100% of AMI to go down as deep as 40. And so you see the income levels by person, by household size here and what that kind of looks like. And then on the next slide, we could start to talk a little bit about some of the other community benefits associated with here. I'm going to turn it over to Colvin Granum here in a second, but I just want to say that Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation has been kind of at our side from the inception of this project, helping us to shape the program, helping us to kind of orient ourselves to the community even further, but really set some what we think are pretty ambitious goals for the building beyond just the affordable housing component. And so we really want to take a minute to talk you through those here now. So I turn it over to Colvin quickly to kind of highlight some of the thinking on that front.
Good evening. This is Colvin Granum. I'm the president and CEO of Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation. Can you hear me? Good, great,
Yes,
great.
we can.
Next slide, please. So our commitment is to leverage this project to create economic mobility for local residents and women and minority-owned businesses. And to that effect, we have put together a highly experienced team, including 32BJ, SEIU. I'll talk a little bit about what they are contributing. Crescent Consulting, which has a long history of working with women and minority-owned businesses and working on projects like this one to increase the participation. St. Nick's Alliance, a long-standing community-based organization focused on affordable housing and economic development and Bedford-Stuyvesant restoration, which is recognized by many as the nation's first community development corporation. Our mission is to disrupt and close the racial wealth gap. So what we're focusing on is job creation. And to that extent, we are looking at, we are collaborating with 32BJ, and we have a commitment to provide jobs that pay prevailing wages and provide quality benefits. And they are, an energetic and active supporter of this project. We are also very much involved in creating opportunities for women and minority-owned businesses, both on the construction side as well as on the retail side. So you saw the rendering that's showing the local businesses, and you saw the commitment to set aside space for local businesses. The priority will be to, recruit those businesses to operate the retail space and to participate in the construction. Obviously, putting together those opportunities for local businesses and women and minority-owned businesses also creates opportunity for more job creation for local residents. We will also engage in job training, construction job training, customer services training to make local residents eligible for the job opportunities to the extent that the training is necessary, both St. Nick's and Restoration have dedicated a tremendous amount of resources to job training in both those areas as well. And we have partnerships with other local organizations and citywide organizations that focus on training for construction and a range of other skills that would be pertinent to jobs in this project. So I think that capsulizes where we intend to go with the economic mobility. I think the last thing I will say is that both of our agencies, St. Nick's and Restoration, have an ongoing commitment to provide services to all residents of Brooklyn, wherever they live, and certainly the services that we would provide related to this project don't stop at construction completion, but will be available to all the residents of the development, particularly those who are living in the affordable housing units. It could be financial coaching and counseling, it could be further career development, but we are committed to a comprehensive provision of economic mobility services during construction and after. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colvin. Next slide, please. Beyond the basics of affordable housing and job creation that are the baseline standard for our projects, we're also continually striving to find ways to go above and beyond in making our developments inclusive of and additive to the community. On the next slide, we are proposing a model that, to our knowledge, is the first of its kind in a project of this nature that would seed an annual impact fund where we would give $50,000 for grants to local nonprofits. This is a process and model that we see as being driven completely by the community, specifically residents of the building and our partners at Restoration, to be managed as a donor advised fund at the Brooklyn Community Foundation. We see the residents of the building determining every aspect of it, from the priority impact areas to the application process to how much is awarded each year. And we really see this as an opportunity to bring together the residents of the building and seed a culture of philanthropy that hopefully will generate even more investment in the community for the future. I'm going to turn it back over to Tucker to talk through some more of the
I'll close this out quickly. I know it's been a long night and we've gone at it for a while, but the next slide, just a couple of other things. Our firm has done a lot of placemaking work over the years. This area, this stretch of Atlantic Avenue, particularly underneath the elevated shuttle, suffers from a lot of neglect. And while we don't control the space by any means, we would certainly be happy to kind of try to work with the MTA and Community Board 3 to think about ways of enlivening this space through public art, through greenery, and through lighting. And so, that's a commitment that we've made to Community Board 3 to try to work on that together, and we're excited to do it. On the next slide, I think I mentioned a kind of exciting approach to bike parking here. We've teamed up with local entrepreneur Shabazz Stewart, whose company Uni provides safe and secure, publicly accessible bike parking throughout the city. In this specific case, there won't be an Uni out on the street. We would work together to create a bike parking hub.
Tucker, it looks like you muted yourself, so we're not able to hear you at this time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Did you hear me speak on bike parking? Okay, so I'm sorry, the next slide. Finally, on the last component of this, just want to highlight on the next slide that we've been thinking a lot, and hopefully it's come through in this presentation, a lot about sustainability. From the solar carving of the facade to stormwater management through biosales and rain gardens to the abundance of green roofs that we're planting throughout the building. But to take it one step further, on the next slide, we've really been exploring some innovative technology. I know the Borough President has been a real leader on this thinking, kind of inspired us to look into it further around grid-connected battery technology that we are looking to install in the building that would draw power from the grid during off-peak times, think like overnight or low demand times, and then store that power and use it to not only power our building during high usage hours, but also potentially feed back into the grid in times of high demand. Recently, I think last week, there was a warning from Con Ed about a brownout or blackout. And so, we like to think that this technology in Bedford-Stuyvesant would allow us to be additive to the neighborhood's infrastructure as opposed to drawing on it. And what it would also allow us to do is greatly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions on our project by, we're not planning to install natural gas in the building at all, either for heating or for cooking. And so, a part of this technology will allow us to make a completely battery-powered energy storage system for the building. And then the last slide, just to recap, hopefully came through a lot of the efforts that we've tried to make on not only creating a significant amount of affordable housing on the site. If you'll recall, only 200 units of affordable housing have been built in Community Board 3 over the last 7 or 8 years. This would be more than a 50% increase through our one site alone to help address the significant, housing shortage that is plaguing Brooklyn generally. But also a kind of suite of, what we think of our kind of forward-looking goals that we've tried to set for ourselves around MWBE participation, around union jobs, around inclusive infrastructure, specifically a kind of new model around community impact that hopefully brings together existing residents with new tenants in the building, and then also on sustainability. So I'll pause there, and we're happy to help answer any questions that you may have.
And Tucker, the slide with the bikes, you were muted for part of that. If you do want to go to that slide, that's okay. If you want to move on, that's also okay.
Yes, sorry about that. I mean, just generally, we partnered with a local entrepreneur, Shabazz Stewart from UNI, who has been piloting publicly accessible, secure bike parking throughout the city. And in this instance, we would not have an Unipod out on the street, but instead would look to integrate a bike parking hub into the building that would be publicly accessible to the neighborhood.
Great. Thank you. I have a few questions. I think you've addressed some of them, but let me get them into the record and see if there's anything additional. Regarding the affordable housing units, what is the qualifying income for prospective households based on household size, the anticipated rents based on the number of bedrooms, and the distribution of units by bedroom size?
Great. So like I mentioned, we're really trying to target between 40 and 100% of AMI. So for instance, for a family of 3, that would work out to an income range of somewhere between $42,000, $43,000 a year up to $108,000 a year from that 40 to 100 range. If we go back to slide 31, I can show you the rents based on bedroom types that we kind of went through. And I know we covered a lot of ground quickly, but slide 31, you really see, a range of rents. I'll wait a second, and if we can't get it, but a range of rents between around $750 for a 1-bedroom up to $2,900 for a 3-bedroom. And then specifically on distribution by bedroom size, that the building program isn't 100% set yet, but right now we're really targeting a mix of bedroom types. Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you go to 31, I think this is 30. Yes, here you go. Here's the rents by unit type. And then in terms of unit distribution, like I said, it's not 100% set in stone yet as we go through the process, but we're really targeting a mix of about 2/3 1-bedrooms and 1/3 2 and 3 bedrooms.
So I just want to follow up, because the MIH you're asking for option 2, which is 80% average, and option 4 is 115% average. And you had a chart with 40 up to 100. So based on where you want to slot these units with the AMI, what do you believe the average rent collection would be compared to the 80% permissible or the 115% permissible?
Right. So, thanks, Richard. So the reason that we've included option 4 in the application, the workforce housing option that allows up to 115% of AMI, was to leave some room for negotiation with the community board in case they wanted to see more units at higher AMIs. You know, I think it's very clear to us now after, you know, our conversations with them that, and particularly more additional guidance from Bed-Stuy Restoration that everyone really wants to target the 40 to 100% of AMI. So, you know, we don't have the ability to, as far as I understand, our land use attorney is also on the call, Eric Plotnick, to modify the application midstream. But we are planning to do option 2, and we're happy to have that kind of reflected in the community benefits agreement. So we are locked into that option.
So are you looking to receive an average rent of 80% AMI? Is that your goal, or is it?
In option 2, the average is 80%, but we're committing to do a range down from 40 up to 100.
So between the 40 and 100, you're going to balance it out to end up back at 80?
Correct.
Thank you.
Given community concerns regarding displacement and the prevalence of rent-burdened households, please identify what marketing strategies would be used in the tenant selection process in order to ensure the highest level of participation from Community District 3, especially those that are rent-burdened or at risk of displacement. And would such a marketing strategy start off with a financial literacy campaign to assist area residents in becoming lottery eligible?
Thank you. So I think I mentioned just briefly, you know, our desire to really have a targeted marketing campaign to support as many residents of Community Board 3 as possible. But I'm going to ask my colleagues, Frank Lang, who's the Director of Housing at St. Nick's, and then Colvin as well, if he wants to weigh in a little bit more on Frank specifically, what we have in mind for reaching those income bands.
Right. So I think the first thing is, you know, the city's process to do outreach for marketing is extensive, but Bed-Stuy Restoration and St. Nick's will go beyond that. We're going to prioritize the marketing in CB3. We have both of us have extensive networks, actually. Restoration is the most in Bed-Stuy, to reach out to community groups, churches, civic organizations, and block associations to make sure that people are aware of it. Both of us are housing ambassadors for HBD, so we do a lot of that outreach. Restoration has an extensive financial literacy services component, and there will be opportunities for people to gain an understanding before any interviews or other happen. You know, the marketing process for something like this, even after it began, would be a minimum of 60 days. And then there wouldn't really be any interviews for probably another 20 or more days. So there is plenty of time for people to start that process to work on it. And it's an ongoing activity for Bed-Stuy Restoration, not just because of this project, but because of wealth building and trying to work with the community.
Thank you. What guarantees that the non-residential uses shown in this presentation will be part of the actual development?
Right. So the ground floor, obviously, you know, we want to create a vibrant building here. We want to be additive to obviously the fabric of the neighborhood. So ground floor retail, you know, makes all the sense in the world. I don't know why we would ever not include that. I understand there's not a commitment in the zoning that holds us to that, but after going through all the trouble for the sidewalk widening and also to create an enlivened building here, I mean, we 100% plan to do ground floor retail. And again, you know, depending on, you know, as we move throughout this process, if that becomes a priority from policymakers, you know, we're happy to think about a commitment along those lines in our final community benefits agreement. And same with the second floor commercial. I mean, I think one of the great benefits of working with Restoration is that they really understand the office market in this pocket of Brooklyn really well because of their experience, you know, managing Restoration Plaza. And so, you know, I think we work really closely together with them to think about tenancy on the commercial side as well.
So it's Borough President Adams' policy to promote the use of renewable energy resources focused on advancing a sustainable future in Brooklyn. It's also his policy to promote stormwater retention practices or what consideration has been given, possibly in cooperation with the DEP, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, NYSERDA or NYPA, to the incorporation of blue, green, or white roofs and the installation of solar panels and or rooftop-mounted grid-connected batteries as part of the intended development?
Yeah, I think we might have stepped on this question a little bit in the presentation, right? But we hopefully it came through that, you know, we have set very high standards for ourselves when it relates to sustainability here. Again, we plan to have those a lot of those commitments reflected in our community benefits agreement. And so, you know, green roofs are included throughout, bioswales and rain gardens are provided throughout. And, you know, we really took some inspiration from the Borough President Adams on the microgrid technology around batteries. And so we hope to create one of Brooklyn, and we think Bed-Stuy's first, at least at this scale, 100% battery-powered building.
Thank you. And my final question, which I think you touched on a little bit, is it's Borough President Adams' policy to maximize quality jobs for Brooklynites. And so please outline what steps will be taken to ensure the inclusion and participation of minority and women-owned business enterprises and or local business enterprises in the construction process.
Hi, it's Gordon Bell from Restoration. And yes, we've already begun that. Bhaskar is, represents an MWBE firm. We at Restoration believe it's important to get invitations to general contractors who represent the MWBE community, so we will be active at ensuring multiple responses. We'll check in with the trades and make sure they are invited to participate and bid through the GCs. We have hired folks directly, and we've built companies to do this sort of work where we bring in folks who are MWBE folks or BIPOC folks to be a part of our projects. The Brooklyn Business Center is also housed at Restoration, and this year we touched 500 local businesses, many of whom are MWBE. When we help those businesses grow and they expand, we have in the past invited them to take space and rent at Restoration, which suits their needs rather well. So we are deeply committed to this all the way through the line, down to the individual, to the MWBE enterprise.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder to web viewers who wish to testify that you must message your request to all panelists in the WebEx chat. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes. We'll now call speakers on this item.
We have Shabazz Stewart via WebEx.
Hi, my name is Shabazz Stewart. I think first I want to touch on Gordon's comments. I work for UNI. I'm the founder and CEO. We are an MWBE as well. We provide secure bike parking throughout the city. I'm a lifelong resident of Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights, having lived about half my life within 5 or 6 blocks of 1045 Atlantic. Foremost, secure bike parking is an essential form of egalitarian transportation for folks who use bikes throughout the city. 80,000 delivery workers, an increasing number of Black and brown folk who live in Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights are going to able to take advantage of this facility as they go to destinations nearby and as they commute on the C and the shuttle train. And then lastly, look, this is very personal for me. I grew up in affordable housing, rent controlled on Quincy Street, not far from the proposed site. And we were bought out from our building. And, you know, it's just really touching me to see the additional inclusion of affordable housing in a project like this along Atlantic Avenue, just as someone who has seen the effects of gentrification in the area throughout his childhood. So I'll end my comments there. I'm very excited to be part of this project. Thank you so much.
Okay, it appears we have no other speakers at this time. So I think we can close the item and the hearing.
So calendar on item number 5 is closed.
The hearing on these items is now closed. Thank you for participating in this blended public hearing. Borough President Adams will review the applications heard today and submit his recommendations to the City Planning Commission for further consideration. Borough President Adams would like to take this opportunity to remind you that the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on these items, which will be announced at a later date. Borough President Adams would also like to remind viewers that comments can be submitted by email to askeric@brooklynbp.org. www.nyc.gov. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.